Good evening. I'd like to call to order the August 22nd meeting of the Joint Town Council, Parking Authority, and Successor Agency. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Thank you and good evening. Councilmember Steve Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Przinski.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor Steve Rice.
Here. We have a tradition in town to have a future leader lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Tonight, we have with us Harrison St. John. Harrison is a 6th grader at Union Middle School and might have some passing relation to our deputy town clerk. His favorite subject is science. He volunteers 2 to 4 times a month at Calvary Church, helping in the kindergarten classroom, which means you have a lot of patience. He'll be in band and wrestling this year in school, and he wants to play saxophone. He enjoys taking care of younger children and pet sitting for a variety of animals, and recently took the certification course for babysitting at Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department. His grandparents are teaching him to paint with watercolors and oil mediums. He's played baseball for 5 years, soccer for years, and has been snowboarding since he was 4 years old. You're probably pretty good at that by now, huh? Yeah. He also wants to learn to play the guitar. He's a junior umpire for Little League and is paid to umpire the AA games for Little League. Please join me in welcoming Harrison St. John. Come on up, Harrison.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice job. Thank you. Let's give him a hand. One more time, let's give Harrison a round of applause. All right, Madam Attorney, the closed session report, please.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, members of the public. The council did not meet in closed session before this meeting. However, the council will be adjourning this meeting to a closed session as duly noticed, and that report, if any required, will occur at the next council meeting.
Thank you. If you wish to speak on any item on tonight's agenda or during verbal communications for items not on this evening's agenda, would you please fill out one of those little buff-colored cards that's in the back of the seat in front of you, and you can turn those in to the clerk on my left and your right. We'll get those lined up. Council matters. Anybody on council have anything to report out? Manager matters.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, several items to report. Where to begin? Los Gatos leadership deadline for applications is Wednesday, a week from today, August 31st. Those applications are available on the Town and Chamber of Commerce website. The Fall Wine Walk is also now available online to purchase tickets. The Wine Walk will actually be held on September 29th, and those tickets are available through the Chamber of Commerce website. We are also soliciting applications for the town-wide garage sale, and those applications are due by September 7th. And next to last, we have the Forbes Mill Footbridge has been a joint project this summer by the Los Gatos Arts and Culture Commission and the Los Gatos Saratoga Recreation Department, where 27 youth working in 3 different arts classes have come up with panels for the footbridge, which are being displayed to the public both tonight at Jazz in the Plaza and on Sunday at the final Music in the Park of this season. So it's an opportunity for the public to see and thank those youth, as well as the Rec Department and the Arts and Cultural Commission for their work on the footbridge murals. It's also my sad point to announce tonight will be Jessica Von Bork's final meeting with the Town Council. She is our Economic Vitality Manager, and I know she's attending later. I don't see her in here right now. She'll be attending the council closed session, and just wanted to acknowledge her work as she accepts a tremendous promotional opportunity to the city of Fremont. Tonight's Did You Know is going to be presented by Mr. Kevin Rohani, our Assistant Director of Public Works and the town engineer. Kevin?
Yes. Did you know the town of Los Gatos, as a part of improving the overall public infrastructure system, has undertaken
Mr. Rohani, could you raise the microphone a little bit, please?
Sure. I think it's on. We'll start again. Did you know the town of Los Gatos, as a part of improving the quality of public infrastructure, has undertaken a lot of projects to construct additional sidewalk infrastructure in town? These projects this year would install over 7,000 linear foot of sidewalks on a number of sites in Los Gatos. These projects include on Blossom Hill Road from Blossom Hill Park to Camino del Cerro near the San Jose city limit, on Wedgwood Avenue from Mulberry Drive to Granada Way and La Rinconada Park, on University Avenue from the new Sports Park entrance to Lark Avenue intersection, also on University Avenue across the entrance to the Vesona Park. In addition, a new traffic signal system plus pedestrian crosswalks has been constructed and is already in service at the intersection of University Avenue and Lark Avenue intersections. All these projects enhance and improve the quality of the pedestrian facility in town, which we strive to do each and every year. These projects are all funded by a combination of state grants and town funds. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Rohani? Thank you, Mr. Rohani. I will make one comment. I have received more positive comments about the new light at University and Lark than probably any public works project in the last 4 years. It's a very popular and a great safety addition. So I just wanted to pass along the feedback I've received from a number of residents.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to the consent calendar. Does any council member wish to pull an item from consent? Does any member of the public wish to pull an item from the consent agenda? Seeing none,
And Mr. Mayor, prior to action, I did want to acknowledge the desk item that
thank
came
you.
on item number 4, which updates the ROPS, the recognized obligation payment schedule for the redevelopment agency, successor agency, that will be reviewed by tomorrow's oversight board meeting. And we just received notification late today that the county will be issuing a no objection letter to the amended ROPS as presented to you tonight and for the oversight board tomorrow.
Terrific. Thank you. Now I'll look for a motion on the consent agenda. Councilmember Brzezinski.
I'll move to accept the consent agenda as so noted.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next is verbal communications. This is a time for anyone in the audience who wishes to speak on an item not on this evening's agenda to do so. I have no cards, but is there anybody who wishes to speak under verbal communications? I see none. So we will close verbal communications and get ready to move on to other business. Madam Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to be recusing myself from the next item. This recusal is based upon information contained in an informal letter issued by the Fair Political Practice Commission, relayed to me by attorney Judith Propp, that there may be a perception that I will have a personal financial gain if not required to fund a campaign. So I will be excusing myself now.
Okay. So move on to the staff report for agenda item 5. This is adopting a resolution for the appointment of nominated persons as if elected at the November 6th, 2012 election and canceling said election. Staff report by Town Manager Greg Larson.
Correct. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, there was a staff report in your agenda packet that was distributed last week, as well as a desk item that was distributed today. In the staff report, we had estimated the savings from not having an election would be $40,000 to $50,000. We received the actual information today from the registrar of voters, and it nets out to $37,700 that would be saved by not hosting an election. It takes an affirmative action by a majority of the council to appoint. Otherwise, the default is the election occurs as previously scheduled by the council.
Okay, any questions of staff? I see none. This is a public hearing. I have no cards. Does anybody, please hand in the card and then come to the microphone. And if you could identify yourself, you will have 3 minutes.
My name is Glenn Boyd. Many years ago, upon induction into the Army, I swore to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States, as have millions of others over the course of our history. Two good friends of mine died fulfilling that pledge. Having taken this oath in all seriousness, perhaps you can imagine my dismay to learn that representative democracy has been suspended in Los Gatos. There will be no real election this fall since the two candidates are unopposed. How can this be? It's because the two other potential candidates have been anonymously attacked and intimidated in a disgraceful way before they could even fully express their views. Evidently, the supporters of the existing candidates believe the citizens of Los Gatos are neither entitled to or capable of making choices among candidates. Well, I'm entitled, I'm capable, and I expect a choice. This situation presents a unique opportunity for someone to step forward and provide real leadership to this town. Legacies, in my view, are largely determined at critical moments when an act of self-sacrifice or bravery turns the tide on an important issue. And conversely, when cowardice and deceit can permanently mark certain individuals. I realize that bravery and sacrifice cannot be demanded. They're given freely as a precious gift. But what a powerful gesture it would be if the two unopposed candidates who are benefiting from the disgraceful tactics used to intimidate others were to withdraw their candidacy until such time that a re-election could be held. Such an act of leadership and sacrifice would send a clear message to all citizens that Los Gatos values civility, fairness, and above all, democracy. In truth, officials at this level of government rarely have the opportunity to provide important moral leadership. This, however, is that opportunity. And we can only hope that there is a hero among you who will lead the fight to restore democracy to this town.
Thank you, Mr. Boyd. I have no other cards. I have one coming in. If you wish to speak to this item, would you please fill out a card and get it to the clerk so we can move this in a reasonable manner? Mr. Van Natta?
Yes. Hi, my name is Jack Van Natta. I, too, fought for democracy. I was in Vietnam. I know that we have two candidates. I have read the articles that were in the Los Gatos Times. I am not aware of all the things that were said in the Los Gatos Times. I'm not aware of any of those people. We are not the only town that has two candidates for two positions or one candidate for one position. I think even our school board has two candidates for two positions. I just don't see nor understand why we would spend another $37,700. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Arzi?
Good evening. In defense of our town council and our planning commission, I want to chat about what's been going on. Bet you never thought I would defend you guys, huh? Well, last night I even came to the defense of restaurants and even chain stores regarding the North 40. Don't worry, I'm not dying. You know, I want to read you a note that I just sent to the Los Gatos Times Observer, or the Los Gatos Weekly, excuse me. You can tell I've been around for a while. And it reads like this. I want to express my outrage at those people who engaged in character assassination against a potential candidate. But this pales to my anger at the editorial of the Weekly. Unlike what the editor is suggesting, there is no reason to believe that these assassins were part of the town council or planning commission. His mere putting in print that it could be possible is as much dirty political tricks as what happened to both potential candidates, too many P's. Innuendo is a powerful tool, especially when used by the editor of a paper, creating gossip and rumor. And in this town, there is too much of that. In his statement that nasty phone calls were made to her, including this in the same sentence, that friends advising her not to run insinuated that her friends engaged in dirty, nasty politics. That's not journalism. That's pure, unadulterated nastiness on the part of our editorial, of that editorial. We are all devastated in what happened to two good people, but to threaten friends to publish their names because they gave sound advice, then I want to be the first on the list. I cautioned a candidate as to the pitfalls of running and winning. To suggest that her friends helped bring her down, and that's exactly what he did, is nonsense. I understand the editor's motivation, but let's move on and stop playing this blame game. It does no good for anyone to make threats.
Vicki Foley-Boyd.
I would like to speak out against the appointment of the two open seats. I'm sure Vice Mayor Spector and Mrs. Jensen are not proud that they have not rightfully earned their positions. I was taught by my parents that a person can truly only be respected if they have earned their place in life rather than having things handed to them. Soon enough, when the going gets tough up there on the council, people will be saying, well, they weren't even elected. We had to take them. I personally would not feel good about that. I find it curious that 4 of the 6 negative posters on the Los Gatos patch have no comment history, which leads me to think these were mean-spirited individuals looking for revenge on Miss Wilcox, and what a perfect opportunity it was. For all we know, they don't even live in town. As a half-century of Los Gatos resident, again, my frustration here is not who is on the council, but that I did not get a chance to vote because people are hell-bent on revenge. We may as well be living in Chicago. My request is that we postpone the election until we have another candidate come forward and hold a special election at such time.
Thank you. I'm seeing cards come in. Please turn them in ahead of time so that we can get you on the list.
I'll be very brief. I'm Dick Allen. I live at College Avenue in Los Gatos for many years. To insinuate that these two fine candidates didn't earn their position is a terrible thing to say. I've watched both of these people in Planning Commission and Town Council meetings. I think they've earned their appointment to the council in every way possible, and I think the council members would agree. Thank you.
Douglas Clark.
Thank you. I'm Douglas Clark. I live on Belmont Avenue, and Mr. Allen effectively stole my thunder. I think these two candidates, 3 years of public service, have demonstrated a desire and a willingness to serve this town. They committed to that by becoming candidates and subjecting themselves to the kind of scrutiny that was implied in the two media outlets. I think that's an act of tremendous bravery. I think that The democratic process is not served by holding elections in abeyance to see if anyone else raises their hand when two good candidates have gone through the appropriate process. This town is faced with a remarkable opportunity also to save a substantial amount of money and dedicate it to a better purpose. I encourage the council to take that step.
Okay. I have no further cards. Please come forward, Mr. Kashub.
I have no quarrel with the qualifications of the people who might be appointed tonight. However, I want to let you know that I am foursquare behind all of the comments that this individual made about how disgraceful it is in this town, and I hope that someone in the town has some plan to at least find out who engaged in this scurrilous attack, these scurrilous attacks. I think it's repugnant to threaten a man's livelihood, and I think it's repugnant to turn this into just something awful. And it shouldn't happen in this town. There has to be something that the town council can do, even if it's postponing the election.
Thank you, Mr. Kashub. Chris Wiley.
I just want to point out that this bickering, a lot of it is hearsay. And I would have expected the two candidates to be the first ones up at this if they really truly wanted to make sure there was a chance for them to have a write-in. And I just think it's unfair at this time to say that the other two people who did go out of their way to plan way ahead for their campaign to make sure they were on time for registration. Well, I'm sure there were a lot of people who may have said, you know, stay where you are on the planning commission, you're good there, don't even get into that other politics. I'm sure they had that kind of input. As for threats, you gentlemen said you went overseas, you went in the Army.
Please address the comments of the council.
You were threatened many times, I'm sure, in the military and bullied, but you went forth. You finished what you were going to do. And I felt if those people really felt threatened, they should have gone forth and run and show everybody we're not going to let anybody threaten us. This stuff, I just read it in the paper today and I was like, whoa, it's getting out of hand. But I truly feel it's not fair to say because two people did register and that there's no competition, that we should now find a way to stop them from having their seat. That's totally not fair. It's like somebody applying for a job, the only person, and say, oh, sorry, you can't have it because there was not a competition. That's it.
Thank you. Please come forward. Go ahead and identify yourself, if you
Hi,
would,
I'm Derek
please.
Deely. I, too, had intended to lambaste the editorial standards of the Times Weekly and the San Jose Mercury News, but that's already been done. Let me reserve my time to the second comment. And that, I think is that far from undermining the democratic process, which is what the San Jose Mercury had implied, I think your decision to scrap the election and to appoint these two existing candidates to the council actually serves the democratic process. I suspect that Jensen and Specter, both having served as public servants in the community for long periods of time, have been subjected themselves to all kinds of criticism, and they've withstood it, and they stand as candidates in this election. And I wonder if would-be candidates Byron and Wilcox were confronted as elected members of the council and not as mere prospective candidates, with the same pressures that they complained drove them out of the election, whether they would then have the mettle to stand up for themselves and to enter the election, or whether or not, again, they would bow to these pressures and duck out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last call. I'm going to close the public hearing. And actually, first I'm going to turn to the town attorney regarding comments made about postponing an election.
Under the Elections Code, the council called for the election, they passed a resolution, and once that occurred and candidates qualified for the election, there's no provision under the Elections Code to cancel the election. However, the issue before the council is that you have the option to either appoint the candidates who qualified and cancel the election, or the alternative option is to make a motion to hold the election as previously scheduled.
Thank you. Look to council for questions, comments, or a motion. Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, this is not a very comfortable time in our town, and I appreciate all the comments made by everyone who spoke tonight. I think that it does express the current status of our community in terms of perception of this particular issue. I received a number of calls from people who've indicated an interest in giving a chance to our citizens to take a vote and to make a selection of two good people to serve on the council in the next term. And hearing some of the issues related to kind of the sense of outrage and the desire to postpone, I appreciate that sense. I appreciate the intensity of feelings. I also appreciate the regard and the respect given to the two candidates who's put their names in nomination, two people with whom I've worked over a number of years in committees, commissions, and on council, and both of whom I have high regard for. But we have two options. One is to appoint tonight, and the other is to hold an election. And my lean is towards holding an election. I think it would give the opportunity for both of these individuals to discuss their perspectives with the community in various forums. It would also allow this period of time to focus on what does it take to be a member of the council. You know, I've spent a lot of time talking to people about running for council, running for commission, because it's a tough job, and there aren't a lot of candidates out there. And I've spoken to a lot of people, and I think the common theme is we're really busy people with family, with school, with work, dealing with the economy. There are very few people who really can actually spare the time. So if people step up and say, I'm willing to do it, I have a great respect for that. But I think in this particular case, it would do us a disservice if we were to merely appoint tonight, because we have the option of an election. And I think that clearly, when you look at election code, there is still opportunity for someone to go as a write-in candidate. Now, is that realistic? I have no idea. But my sense is this. My sense is this, that is one of the legal options that is available to members of the community. Whether that would happen or not, I have no idea, okay? But I do sense that if the council were to terminate the process tonight and tell those people, some of whom are here, some of whom who've expressed their interest to me, that they want to have a chance to vote for two candidates, I think that we would be doing a disservice to the community by stopping the process at this time, okay? I do feel that if we were to do that, then we wouldn't do justice to the two individuals who have put their names in nomination. Now, that may seem to some of you as a rationalization, but I really do believe what I'm saying. And I do believe that, that this community deserves the opportunity to hear from the candidates and to process to the end. The question of why would we spend $37,000 on something like this? We got an email from someone saying, why don't we have a dog park? We'll use it for that. My sense is that, you know, for the democratic process, particularly the most significant right we have, which is the right to vote, we wouldn't even be asking this question if there were 3 candidates. Would even be in our mind. We wouldn't ask the question. I think that since we do have an opportunity to go forward with an election, and the end result of which may be exactly what would happen had we taken the opportunity to appoint tonight, it would be worth the journey and the opportunity to get to November and take a vote and be able to say to our community, these are the people we really want serving us on the council. So, Mr. Mayor, that would be my recommendation.
Is that a motion?
Well, I'll make it in the form of a motion that we hold the election for the November date as so noted.
Okay, there is a motion. Is there a second?
Mr. Mayor, I have some questions for staff before we proceed with any motions this evening.
I'm not, can we do that before there's a second?
There is a motion.
Yeah, there's a motion. We have to either get a second or it die for lack of a second.
Usually we have questions for staff before we get into the commentary of the council discussion.
I understand that, but Councilmember Brzezinski made a motion. So if there's no second, then we can proceed that way. But is there a second for the motion, first of all?
Does Mr. Brzezinski want to withdraw his motion at this time and find out what the questions are?
I'm not interested in withdrawing my motion.
Okay.
And I do believe the mayor invited questions of staff before we started the discussion.
All right,
But
so I will
ordinarily
second
it's
the motion
possible.
for purposes of discussion and moving things along, and then we'll see where
Okay,
where it
so there's a
goes.
motion and a second. Discussion, and that would include questions of staff. Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I would like to just ask the town manager or our clerk, how many people actually pulled papers for this contest?
I'll defer to the deputy or the clerk administrator to confirm the final number.
6 people pulled papers.
So I heard mention of, 2 candidates that actually completed the process of filing, who met the deadline, who organized, and obviously when you have a filing period, you have a beginning and an end. And then there was a total of 4 others that chose not to run for whatever reason, being that it was economic, being that it was they were scared away, or whatever it was. But the bottom line is you have a beginning and an end of a filing period in order to give everybody an equal opportunity to file. And we'll never know the true reason why those other individuals didn't file and move forward. But what was previously stated in this discussion this evening is there's several other municipalities that are in the same boat as us. We have Morgan Hill, Cupertino, Campbell, Los Altos, Los Gatos Union School Board, Los Gatos. And why would we vote to spend the town's money, $40,000, when we have a $2 million budget deficit this year, when it's all but certain that these two people who did follow the process are all but certain to win? I'm all for democracy and potential write-in elections, but when I Googled write-in election this week, the top 2 vote getters are Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse. And I'm not really willing to spend $40,000 of the town's money as we sit up here and agonize over $1,500 going to the art docents, or $1,500 going towards the photo guild, Or should we keep the library open and dip into our pocket and go into deficit to keep the library open a few more hours? I think it's a waste of the taxpayers' money, and I believe in the democratic process, but I don't believe in wasting the taxpayers' money for something that's all but certain. So that's my point of view, and I hope that others can comment on that.
Okay. Further comments? I'll actually weigh in on a couple of things. First of all, although Councilmember Leonardo said we have a $2 million budget deficit, we don't. We balance our budget every year, and I want to make sure that everybody understands that. Second of all, you left off Saratoga on your list, which has 2 candidates for 2, and they are holding their election. And while I would agree with Councilmember Przynski that it is unlikely that a write-in candidate would come forth and win, the state of Alaska elected a United States senator 2 years ago on a write-in ballot. So it does happen, and in much bigger venues than the town of Los Gatos. I really came in this evening somewhat undecided on which way I was even leaning on this. But one thing that is very clear about Los Gatos is that it values debate. It values discussion of ideas. And to appoint council members, one of whom has not ever run for council, would rob the citizenry of that debate and that discussion. And on that basis, and that basis alone, and you won't run into a more fiscally conservative person than I, but I believe it's worth $1.20 per citizen of the town of Los Gatos to have that debate held. So I'll be supporting Councilmember Przynski's motion. Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's always easy when you're personally not writing the check for the $37,000. And I realize across the enterprise, when you put it in those terms, it doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it is in this economic time. And we did have to dip into our reserves to balance the budget this year, so I wanted to clarify that point. And quite frankly, there can still be a debate. We have the League of Women Voters. They could bring the candidates out and discuss the issues if that's what we need to do. This is about fairness. This is about a filing beginning and a filing end. There's a deadline. I would like to know how many of us up on the dais here would love to be in these 2 candidates' shoes if we were running for election. Well, no doubt. And I would imagine under different circumstances, say it was a couple of years from now and we found ourselves in that fortunate position where we were uncontested, we would be tickled by that for sure if we were running again. But all that doesn't matter. What matters is these are the 2 people who were organized. They stepped up. They had campaigns ready to go. They had funding moving forward. They did what they were supposed to do. They followed the rules. And for what it's worth, there was 4 others that chose not to do that by the deadline. And as you said, we are the only community, we are one of many communities that is in this position. And maybe Saratoga wants to hold an election. I'm not voting in Saratoga, but I will not be supporting the motion because I feel like it's a waste of the taxpayers' money. Above all else, I do agree in the democratic process, but I think spending $40,000 for an election that's all but certain is just a waste of the people's money. And you 3 can vote to waste the people's money if you'd like.
Okay. Further Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you, and thank you for the permission to vote how I want. I was going to anyway. Actually, I hadn't quite decided. I'm a writer, and so I write things. It's how I process ideas, and so I've got 2 speeches here. One, hold the election, one, don't hold the election. And I've gone back and forth. I wanted to get the motion on discussion so that procedurally we could move things along. And a couple of interesting points have come up, so I'm not actually going to read my either one of my speeches, I don't think. First of all, in both cases, as I was processing, should we hold the election, should we not hold the election, the idea of a write-in candidate doesn't even show up in my notes, so I wasn't thinking about that so much. I was thinking about, first of all, I was really disturbed by the article and the information that was in the newspaper this week. it is really hard. As Mr. Brzezinski said, we talk to a lot of people who have an inkling of an idea that they might want to run. And it's like, so what is it like? How much time does it take? How much privacy do you lose? How much stress do you have? I mean, and unfortunately, you tell them the truth and then they go away because it's not an easy job. And obviously you have to grow a pretty thick skin as you go through your term and through campaigning and through serving on the years. So finding out that in addition to that very hard decision, that we apparently had some potential candidates who were, as one person said to me, bullied. I mean, this is bullying, intimidation behavior. And, I don't know exactly what was said because I wasn't party to any of those conversations. But the fact that it happened in more than one case and apparently with more than one conversation in each case is just, again, it's just really disturbing. I also do not like what it does to the two candidates that we have before us. And I absolutely trust that they had no idea, we're not part of this at all. But I think maybe what their supposed supporters didn't realize is how disrespectful and insulting it is to these candidates. Because, I mean, what is the message here? Well, the only way that we can get these people elected is if we scare off all the competition. These are two very strong women. They're not afraid of a fair competition. I mean, they have confidence in their abilities. So I don't think they really thought that through. I also like to think of myself as being very penny conscious. I mean, I fought in the budget process for an extra few $1,000s to keep the library open hours. So I know what $37,700 can buy us in the town. And then I come to but what is the bigger principle? And I said I was a writer, but I'm not in the same class as Mr. Boyd. You are really very eloquent in expressing what I think is the real heart of the matter for me, which is not dollars as it is the principle and the idea of democratic principle. So we have deprived, through a set of circumstances, our voters from an opportunity to vote for who they want to have on council. So I am intrigued with the idea of going ahead and having the election with a plea to the League of Women Voters, to the Chamber, to the service clubs, to the homeowners associations and whoever else to go ahead and hold the candidate forums. It'll probably just be the two candidates that we know of. I don't know if there'll be anyone else. I don't think it's likely. But in the 3 times that I have gone through election campaigns, I have always found that to be a really valuable opportunity to talk to people that you don't normally talk to find out what they love about living in Los Gatos, what's important to them for their quality of life, what they think they should have improved in how they live and work and play and raise their families in this community. And I think it would be a very good refresher experience for our incumbent and a valuable learning experience for the non-incumbent who, in all likelihood, in a couple of months will be joining us up here on the dais. So I'm going to support the motion, and I just really think that the dirty political tricks that we apparently were seeing in this community don't belong here. And it obviously did not seem to work. So I'm hoping we never have this experience again. And I look forward to watching the candidates go through the process in the next couple of months and getting a ballot and seeing that Los Gatos is participating as it should be.
Okay, Councilmember Brzezinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of comments. Kind of reflection on some comments that Councilman Leonardis said. A couple of times you phrased it, the election is all but decided. And I'm focusing on the words all but. The all but decided insinuates that there is one other part of the process beyond the nominating period closure. And that is the possibility that our community could have someone step up as a person indicating for write-in. I don't have any idea if that would be even interesting to anyone, but for us to not accept the fact that that's part of the process, and this is America, and in so knowing that that's part of the process, we in knowing that that's part of the process, I think we would be derelict in our duty as a council to not acknowledge that that's part of what we're about. The other thing I think I want to point out is that it's not always about the money. And in so many ways, I don't have any interest in spending any amount of money for something that is irrelevant. But I think that what we see tonight is something that is relevant, that does have an opportunity to allow our citizens to exercise that right to vote, and perhaps our candidates to be able to express themselves completely. Because if we didn't allow that right, then after tonight, it's over. There's no point in going forward to do anything else, do any other inquiry, any other vetting. It's over. And I think that at that juncture, there may be all kinds of cities who have decided to go ahead and just appoint, but we're not all kinds of cities. And I do think we're unique, and I think this is an opportunity for us to step up and indicate some of the unique characteristics that we have as a community, and that's my intention in making the motion.
Okay. Councilmember Leonardis?
Question for staff. Has there ever been a time in the history of Los Gatos where we've had an uncontested election, and what was the voting, which may or may not have occurred at that time?
I certainly do not have that information available this evening. I would look to see if council members have any recollection in their life of service to the town.
Yes, go ahead.
Strong believer that every process has a beginning and an end, and if we ran our presidential election this way, we would still have folks like Newt Gingrich and Michelle Bachmann and Herman Cain in the race. But unfortunately, there comes a part in time when you have to pick people moving forward. And there was 6 people who pulled papers. They all had equal opportunity to file by a deadline to state their case. I have a very difficult time with the fact that we are going to essentially keep this process open just for the sake of Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck getting nominated in a write-in election. I think that these candidates and the service clubs can still host their forums, and I'm sure, just being a member of Kiwanis and knowing about the League of Women Voters, that they would be more than willing. I see no need to spend this money. $37,000 is not a lot of money if you're not writing the check. But again, as we agonize over things like library hours being open in between Christmas and New Year's, should we keep it open? No, we decided we were going to close it. Well, then the town manager said no, a couple council people want to keep it open, so we keep it open. But these are the things we're trying to do to save money in these tough economic times. And here we're willing to throw away $40,000 on what's an experiment. I just think it's shameful. I really feel it's shameful. We can debate this all evening, but for me, it comes down to one thing. It comes down to the money, and it comes down to deadlines, a beginning and an end and a filing period, and that's it, regardless of how you feel about any of these candidates and any of the candidates that may have dropped out in the race. And again, we're acting as if there were 2 candidates that were bullied. I get bullied all the time in this position. I get bullied by developers. I get bullied by what I consider people in the community and other things. And if you cannot make it through the filing period, if you're not strong enough to make it through a filing period through bullyism, you're going to make no kind of council candidate or no kind of council representative. So I don't buy that. I think the newspaper and their editorial was highly unsubstantiated. It read to me like, fiction. You know, there's no proof, no facts. And the bottom line is this: if you have, you know, things in your past, or if you have a certain position, and I personally have to pass up business all the time in the real estate business because I know I'm going to be voting on a topic that's close to one of the projects I'm working on, and I leave money on the table. But these are factors why people may or may not run. And we'll never get to the bottom of all those issues, but we do have two people here who have risen to the occasion, who have filed, who have done everything correctly, and I just don't see any reasoning in holding an election for election's sake, just so everybody can go in and check the two boxes and pick them, and spending $40,000 more that we don't have to do that. As Council Member Brzezinski said, he said, there are other options. Yes, there are other options, but those other options are extremely unlikely and will not happen. And opening the field to more people who didn't play by the rules and filed by the deadline at this point who want to step up is just unfair to the people who do play by the rules. And trying to bring out this debate and rationalize it and rationalize newspaper editorials is just, you know, to me, it's the opposite of the democratic process we're trying to defend. These folks followed the democratic process. So did the other 4 people who pulled their papers. They didn't complete the democratic process. We have 2 candidates in there, and now we're going to waste the taxpayers' money just to prove a point.
Now, please. Councilmember Brzezinski.
That's one opinion. And you are entitled to yours as well. And so am I. I hope that the people who were abusive are found out. I hope that they're exposed. I think it's really time for those people who have taken advantage of the system, who attempted to circumvent the process, and who have threatened individuals and have caused trauma in our community. I hope they're found out, because I think this is a real violation of our democratic process. And those people who perpetrated this need to feel consequences for this act. I would hope it never happens again. I would hope that this is an isolated incident that happened, and we have learned the lesson. But the only way that I think you can actually guarantee a closure on something like this is if those people who acted inappropriately and who acted as bullies are found out. And I hope that that's part of the process as well. You may not like it, but you know, they say politics is hardball. And it is. So if you're playing hardball, expect to be able to be called out if what you've done is something that's in violation. And I do believe this was extreme violation and very, very inappropriate for this community. Oddly enough, happening on our 125th anniversary. To me, that really is very, very odd that that would be the occurrence at this point in time. I hope that we can move forward, call the question, and conclude.
Okay, I'd really like this to avoid being a back and forth. If you have something new to say, I'm more than open to hearing it, but if it's going to be a continuation, I think we need to move on.
I do have something new to say that I'd like to add. So, thank you for allowing me to speak.
Okay.
Dennis Byron and I ran a campaign together last time called Measure D. And Dennis Byron is a friend of mine, and I spoke to Dennis Byron about the ups and downs of running for office. I don't know why Dennis Byron didn't complete his filing process. I invited him to lunch. I wanted to talk to him about it. But I explained some of the emotions that I go through on the dais and some of the things. And for what it's worth, you know, I said, run if you want to run and run if you want to be your own person. But don't run because somebody just pushes you out there and they want you to be their stooge. So I basically said, you have been through that before and you know what that feels like. And it's entirely up for you to run, and I support you if you run. But you know, basing a decision like this, $40,000 on hearsay, based on 2 of the 4 candidates that seem to be the popular choices among some members in the community that were pushed out there on a life raft with no support, is a waste of the taxpayers' money. We could go on and on and on about this debate, but we have 2 people who filed on time, completed the process, did what they were supposed to do, and now those 2 individuals are basically going to have to spend a bunch of money on a campaign. The community, Los Gatos, is going to have to spend almost $40,000 here to have a campaign just so they can go into office, and I just do not support that, and I'm sorry. I just will not make my decision based on hearsay.
Okay, thank you. I see no further comments. I'm going to call the question. Those in favor of the motion of holding the election signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? No. Motion carries 3-1. Councilmember Leonardis dissenting. That's the last agenda item we have for this evening. We are adjourned.
Evening, I'm going to call the August 22nd meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Welcome. We'll follow an agenda tonight. There's agendas and packet items outside on tables. If you're interested. We'll begin with roll call.
Commissioner Sayoc?
Here.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Here.
Commissioner Smith?
Here.
Commissioner Talsford?
Here.
Vice Chair Erickson?
Here.
Chair Jensen?
Here.
And Commissioner O'Donnell has an excused absence.
And it's time for the Pledge of Allegiance. I did tonight. Commissioner Bourgeois, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Next is approval of the minutes of our meeting of August 8th, 2012. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at those? Any corrections, additions, or motion? Commissioner Bourgeois.
I'll move to approve the minutes of August 8th as they were submitted.
Is there a second? Commissioner Sayoc, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. The next item is written communications. We have a desk item on item number 3, and I think that's it. Is that correct?
And item number 6.
And item number 6, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I'm just looking at item number 6 and how is it different than the one in our packet? Oh, 26. Okay. And that brings us right to requested continuance, item number 6, which is a review of the town's draft and proposed sustainability plan. We actually discussed this at our last meeting of August, on August 8th, and it was determined that we needed more time for the commission to review it and make proper comments. So we now have a request from our staff to continue the meeting till September, or consider the sustainability plan on September 26th. Is there a motion? Commissioner Erickson.
I so move.
Is there a second? Commissioner Talsford. It's moved by Commissioner Erickson, seconded by Commissioner Talsford to continue that item to our meeting of September 26th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Actually,
Okay.
I'd wanted to make a comment before the
I'm
vote.
sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. Kind of moot now, but since I had moved to continue this to have a little more time to review it, I think Commissioner Sayoc actually had a really good idea, and as I'm reading it, she talked about maybe having priorities in there. So I'm leaning toward that as well. So maybe as my fellow commissioners are reviewing it, maybe think about that when you're reading it as to perhaps there should be some prioritization of the items in the sustainability plan. So just a thought.
Okay, that doesn't change your consideration of whether to continue the item to September 26th. You're just encouraging us in our review to have priorities in mind.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. You will. So that item is continued to September 26th. The next item is subcommittee reports. All members of the commission also serve on various subcommittees. They could be dealing with historic preservation in the town. They could be dealing with issues about land use policy on their general plan committee. They could be reviewing potential developments. So, commissioners, I know that North 40 met, and I know that Historic Preservation Committee met. Commissioner Erickson.
The Historic Preservation Committee met this afternoon, considered 2 items, an architectural site application to do a change to an front entry of a residence in the Almond Grove Historic District at 229 Wilder, and with some changes to the original proposal, the Historic Preservation Committee approved the application. There was also a non-action information item about a proposal to demolish a pre-1941 residence on Pine Avenue.
Thank you. Commissioner Bourgeois, North 40?
Yes, the North 40 specific plan advisory committee had 2 meetings. We met on the 15th, last Wednesday, and the 21st, which was yesterday. We had 2 very productive meetings. We went through a series of issues for the North 40 specific plan and made several recommendations to the staff and the consultants as they're going in to develop the plan at this point. We looked at issues such as height, the type and percentages of residential, the ratios of for different commercial uses, setbacks, open space, the orientation of the zones that were proposed. So a lot of good work was done at these meetings, and I think the next step is that staff is going to go back and be preparing the specific plan, which will come back to the committee, then to Planning Commission, and then to Town Council. So I think that'll probably be after the first of the year at this point.
So if any of you watching on TV or in the audience are interested in that, you'll have to pay attention to notices about when our next meeting will be. We are now going to take out of order our report from the Community Development Department, because as many of you can see here, we have a new person sitting at the table. So, Ms. Bailey.
You all know Todd Caperso is the Director of Parks and Public Works. Well, tonight he's got a new hat that he would like to share with you about the reorganization that Wendy had sent an email to you all about, and he will go over that.
Thank you very much, Sandy. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. I've met most of you over the last 4 years in my role as a Director of Parks and Public Works, and have been before you several times on issues like park master plans and the CIP review. However, effective this past Monday, I have also assumed the role of Acting Director of the Community Development Department. We view this as an opportune time for us to review some different organizational possibilities for the town moving forward. We are very fortunate to still have former Director of CDD, but now Director of Special Projects, Wendy Rooney, who will continue to work for us and work on many issues that are important to both Planning Commission and the Council. We also are very fortunate to have Sandy Bailey elevate her game, so to speak, to Assistant Director of Planning and basically run the community development side of the house. This is not a reorganization of both departments. We are not combining departments. We will still function as two separate departments. So I will have two hats, two separate titles. I will still be the Director of Parks and Public Works and will be the Acting Director of Community Development. And you will see me at many Planning Commission meetings, probably more often than not, but I may be here in either role. So I look forward to working with all of you and continuing the good relationship that we have. So look forward to it. Thank you.
So Mr. Caperso, welcome, and thank you very much. We'll now do, and before I actually get to the part where many of you might want to speak with us, I want to just give you a little overview of how we do the process and how these meetings work. First of all, I should say, and I'm violating it, if you have a device, would you please put it on silent? If you want to have it on, that's fine with me, but if you put it on silent, we would really appreciate it because it can be distracting if it goes off. If you do come up and speak, leave it behind because sometimes it can do feedback with the microphone. So we'd appreciate it if you just leave it with your whoever it may be. On each item that's on our agenda, we may, there's two items that are a little bit different tonight. They're on our, what we call our consent calendar. Those are items where the town staff and various consultants have reviewed the particular application and decided that it meets all of the various ordinances and policies of the town, in some cases with these two consent items because they're about wireless facilities, that there's special rules that apply to them, and we may be able to just make a motion on them without going through a public hearing process. With respect to the other items, the way we'll do it is we'll ask the staff if they have any report for us. They will give us any information that they think is important. Commissioners will then have the opportunity to ask staff questions about that staff report or about the issue that's before us. Once that's completed, then we invite the applicant on the project or the applicant's representative to come up and talk to us about the particular project. That applicant and or any member of the applicant's, I hesitate to say entourage, but development team is welcome to speak with us for a cumulative time of 5 minutes. After that, anyone else who wants to speak about the project has 3 minutes to talk to us. Then we invite the applicant to come back up and sum up with another 3 minutes. Anyone that comes to speak will ask you to identify yourselves. There's buff cards in the seat backs in front of you. If you'd fill them out if you're going to speak, we'd appreciate it. It makes it part of our record and our minutes. And we might also or might not have questions for you after you speak. So I know the instinct is to turn and run away from the podium, but wait and see if there's a question for you first. With that, now is the time in our meeting for what we call verbal communications. Anyone in the audience who wishes to speak to us about something that is not a part of our regular agenda, now is the time for you to do that. I don't have any cards, but now would be the time for you to do that. Okay, seeing no one, I'm going to take the consent items one at a time because I think we may have a question about one of them. So item number 1 is on our consent calendar. It's conditional use permit application U-12-0009 at 15951 Los Gatos Boulevard, which is on the corner of Placer Oaks and Los Gatos Boulevard, and it's requesting modification of existing cell phone equipment, wireless equipment that's on the roof of that building. Does any member of the commission or any member of the audience want to pull that item, which means we'll have a full public hearing as I described? Seeing no one, is there a motion with respect to item number 1? Commissioner Sayak.
Okay. I move to approve item number 1 under consent, which is located at 15951 Los Gatos Boulevard.
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Sayak, seconded by Commissioner Bourgeois. Any discussion or questions on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Passes unanimously. Item number 2 is also currently on our consent calendar. Again, this is an application for cell phone equipment. It is conditional use permit application U-12-005 on 218 Kensington Way, which is within the PG&E right-of-way between Los Gatos Almaden Road and Blossom Hill Road. And again, this is currently on our consent calendar, but anyone on the commission or in the audience who wants to pull that item and have a full hearing may do that. Commissioner Talsfor.
I don't want to pull it, but I do have 2 comments to make, and so I don't know how to do that. What?
Can I speak?
I mean, I can speak afterwards, but
if you had a question regarding the increase in the size, we can provide that for you, and then you can see if you have more clarification, because I believe that was your concern.
it is. So, okay.
So if you want to ask the question, then we can respond.
So it's actually more of a comment. Well, first of all, I was encouraged to see that in the report that it said that the antennas will be painted the tower called the PG&E tower color, which will be an improvement from what it is today, because they are the ones on the Kensington property are white compared to the gray of the tower. So I was encouraged about that. But what I would like to say is I'm glad I went out to see it. But it's when we have exhibits that really are not, how do I say it? You could not tell from this exhibit how imposing those structures would be, is my point. I would like to see that we somehow encourage, require that the cell phone companies provide us better evaluation materials, because I cannot see from these photographs in here, this is subpar. And it is not, it's horribly wrong. And we made a huge mistake a few years ago with approving a tower that we had no idea what the reality of it was, as many of us learned after the phone calls we got from residents. So there has to be improvement in how these are presented in staff reports. Okay, that's my comment.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any specific concern about the actual parameters of the application that's part of the consent calendar and the conditions that are attached to it?
No.
Okay. So then I'm not going to consider the item pulled. And is there a motion with respect to item number 2? Commissioner Erickson.
I'll move to approve conditional use permit application U12005 at the subject property.
Is there a second? Commissioner Sayoc? It's been moved to approval by Commissioner Erickson, seconded by Commissioner Sayoc. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None? Passes unanimously. Which brings us to item number 3, architecture and site application S-12-028, 357 Pennsylvania Avenue. This has been continued from our meeting of, was it August 8th?
July 11th.
July 11th, okay. So we have staff report, we have a desk item. Does any member of the commission need additional time to read or review that desk item before we start? Okay, I'm gonna just take a couple minutes. Okay, does any member of the commission have a question? Oh, actually, I should ask Ms. Mosley, is there anything to add or highlight with respect to our staff report?
No, everything you need is in the staff report.
Any questions for the staff? Commissioner Talswar.
There was a assertion in the Downhill Neighbor letter of, it was in the, hang on, exhibit. Anyway, it was I don't know where it is.
Exhibit 17.
Thank you.
In the addendum.
Is that, yeah, that's what I'm referring to. Where the Downhill Neighbor was saying that although his house was recorded somewhere as being 25 feet, 8 inches, it's actually only 22. Did anyone verify that?
The applicant will be able to speak to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Invite the applicant or the applicant's representative to come forward.
Yes, Chairperson Jensen and fellow commissioners. My name is Dave Lazaris. My wife Cynthia and I are the applicants. I'm going to make a very short presentation and let my design professionals talk about the more specific questions you might have. Since our last meeting, two of the issues were landscaping and architecture. Since that meeting, we have both come up with a conceptual landscape plan for the front, and when asked, you wanted one for the back, so we're showing you a conceptual landscape plan for the back. The backyard is conceptual only. The front plan, if you wanted to adapt that as part of this application, we will accept that because the conceptual plan would be our final plan. We reached out to the two neighbors that had questions. I sent them both the landscape plan, the new architectural plan, and the town's architect's new report with an invite to please reach out to me should they have any questions. One of the neighbors, Mrs. Quintano, and her husband reached out to me. I met with them. She's here to speak tonight. I think she made some suggestions. Your town architect made some suggestions, and the plan you showed today, that we're showing you today, is a combination of those suggestions. So I'll let my two consultants make their presentation, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Mr. Spalding, before you start, are there any questions right now for Mr. Lazaris? Okay. Mr. Spalding, even though we know who you are, could you please identify yourself for the record?
Chris Spalding, architect, 801 Camellia Street, Berkeley. This was our original design, which we went over last hearing. This was the revised design as we submitted it. So what we did is we made the main upper roof into a hip. So it removed large portions of the mass at each upper corner, and we also clipped these eaves back on each side, so it removed about 3.5 feet of apparent width to the building. And then we made changed the dormer to be a strong front-facing gable to better match the streetscape as people were suggesting. So then after this was submitted, it went back to the town architect. We showed it to the neighbors, or my client showed it to the neighbors. And the consensus was that while everyone liked removing the bulk, making the upper ridgeline into a hip, nobody really liked the big front-facing gable. So what we'd like to do is go back to our original dormers, which are smaller, less bulky, cast less shadow, and is the preferred alternative both of my client, of the town architect, and apparently also of Lee Quintana across the street. Now also, so hopefully that'll be acceptable to the commission as well.
Mr. Spalding, I'm just going to stop you for a second. For ease of reference, can we call that revision 3 or design 3?
Sure.
So that we know what we're talking about? Okay. And the middle one was number 2, and the first one was obviously number 1?
Okay.
Okay.
So the revised shadow study has the revision 2 with the large front dormer. Now, the shadow study, as we are supposed to draw it by the town rules, has June and December, so the summer solstice and the winter solstice. The only neighbor that gets shadowed is the downhill neighbor, and for the most part.
I bet you have questions.
Okay, for the most part, the main shadows on that house come from the trees, not from our house, which are mostly cast to the north. Do you want landscape questions?
Let's see if there's questions for you. I do have a card from Mr. Rosenberg.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Talsfor.
Thank you. Thank you for the redesign on that, although I'm concerned about some of those unmet issues, can you put the shadow study back up? And if you move it, okay. So can you orient me as far as the streets and the downhill neighbor?
Here's Pennsylvania Avenue. Here's the downhill neighbor.
Where is it?
right here.
Right there. So that's the edge of his house?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is the big tree back here, and then this is the December shadow from the big trees back there. This is the December shadow of our house. The portion of the proposed house that shades this neighbor is the one-story portion. The two-story portions are the shadow out here in December. So, but at any rate, the smaller dormer here, the hip roof here, will lessen the shadow on this house earlier in the year, like in September. So all these changes are helping reduce the shadow on that, on the west.
So, yeah, let me just jump in here. So, in the letter from the neighbor, he had made a suggestion to perhaps, if you could move the house 6 feet uphill, it would really relieve him of this loss of light. And I'm just wondering, did you explore that with him? Did you know about that? When you redesigned this, were you thinking about that? Because I know that was one of the items that the Planning Commission was concerned with.
Well, we can't move it 6 feet or our garage no longer works. If we moved it 6 feet, we'd only have one stall that would be accessible. So we'd only have one legal parking space.
How much could you move it so that it wouldn't alter your garage?
2 feet.
Okay.
Other questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, Mr. Spalding. I know I asked this at the last meeting. If you could just remind me why the driveway, I think you had a reason why the driveway needed to be placed on the uphill side, because it seems that you would want to put the house closer to the driveway on the uphill neighbor and then have a driveway between the house, and then, it would kind of repeat that pattern and kind of make equal the spacing between the houses. So, but I believe you had a reason for it, and if you could just repeat that for me.
The reason is because this corner of the property, this is the edge of the embankment. So if we couldn't reproduce, if you mirror image this corner of the garage, even if we lowered it down, to this grade, at the back corner here, we'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 feet up in the air. So we'd be over the height
Or a
limit.
7-foot cut, right?
No, you couldn't do that either. Or then you'd be going down, and the house would you'd then expose the edge of the house to a tall wall. I suppose you could cut it down, but yeah.
Other questions? Commissioner Talsworth, you've got your hand up, or you?
I do. So did you explore any other avenues to shift the home somewhat? It is on a hillside. Did you think about stepping it up on that end? Do you think there'd be a way to perhaps articulate that side that's near the downhill neighbors so that some of that square footage was pushed to the back of the house? What other avenues did you think about it, designing this to mitigate the overpowering shadowing of the neighbor's house?
Well, again, the shadows are cast. The main shadows that fall on that house are cast by the one-story portions. So if I was to push this aside and make it deeper, then that would just increase the shadows on the house, because it's the one-story portion that's casting the shadow.
So
and the trees. So in other words, it's not solving the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
For now.
Other questions? Did anyone have a question for the landscape architect before I let the applicant sit down? Commissioner Smith.
Not for the landscape architect, but I know that Ms. Mosley had indicated that the applicant would talk about the height difference that the neighbor raised in the letter.
Oh, yes. When we draw the streetscape, we draw it from photos. So if you look at the town architect's report, for instance, I don't trespass onto people's properties and try to measure their house. So we take the photograph and do our best to estimate the height. And I apologize, my workers, when they draw it in the computer, and the computer, you dimension it, and it gives you an exact dimension. I should have had them put plus or minus. Without that, it looks like we were a surveyor and had actually shot it with a surveying instrument. But if you look in the architectural report, July 31st report, there's a photo of the house to the left on page 2, excuse me, and that's the picture we used to estimate the height. So I mean, I believe the owner if he says it's 22 over our estimation.
Can you just remind me, and the height of your home again is, or that your design?
At the highest point, it's 29'6".
So it's almost 30 feet. And what is it on the first level portion of the height of the roof?
You mean to the first story
To the
eave?
first story, yes. Right.
I don't have a scale with me, but I will estimate it. There's a dimension line on the elevations there that is from the porch floor to the eave is 10 feet. And on the downhill side of the house is a couple of feet up, and on the uphill side it's about a foot up. So 11 to 13 feet.
So it's 11 feet?
11 feet at the uphill side, 13 feet at the downhill side.
13 feet at the downhill side.
Plus or minus.
Any other questions? Commissioner Smith?
I just have one quick question. The tree in the back that carries the largest shadow, is that the existing tree that's
Yes.
back there?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the healthy tree that the arborist indicated should stay?
That is tree number... That is tree number 12. 11 and 12. 10, 11, and 12. Let's see.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I don't see any, so your 5 minutes is more than passed.
Okay.
And I ask any member of the public in the audience who wants to speak on this issue. I don't have cards, but you're welcome to come up, and please do hand out a card to our clerk when you come up, and identify yourself for our record, please.
Hi, my name's Neil McNaughton, the owner of 347 Pennsylvania Avenue, the house downhill from the proposed development. My house is a bell ringer and it was recently renovated by Gary Schlow. I'm requesting that the proposed house be relocated on the lot as it is too close to my house. Firstly, the streetscape provided by the developer is grossly inaccurate. My house is 21 feet tall. I just had it surveyed, but it's shown in the plans as 25 feet, 8 inches tall. The developer simply added 5 feet to the house, the height of my house, to disguise the massive size of the proposed house in relation to my house. Apparently, the developer has added 5 feet to the height of other neighboring houses, such as 5 Palm Avenue. Secondly, the positioning of the proposed house on the lot is not equitable. My house and garden will be shaded by the proposed house. My view will be blocked and my privacy impacted. but the uphill neighbour would not be shaded and their view and privacy would be barely impacted. For example, my ground floor windows would be 15 feet from the proposed house, completely blocking my light and view, while the uphill neighbour's ground floor windows would be 50 feet from the proposed house, and there would be minimal impacts on their view. Thirdly, the proposed house is not in compliance with the neighbourhood, where houses are centred on their lots, but not highly skewed in their lots. I'm requesting that the proposed house be moved 6 feet to the west.
Thank you, Mr. McNaughton. Are there any questions? Commissioner Talsfor.
Hello, thank you. You make some very compelling statements in your letter. So now you're telling us that your house is not 22 feet tall. It's 21 feet because you had it surveyed. Is that correct?
Yeah, my house was recently renovated by Gary, and the plans are on file at the town. They show it as 22 feet.
Okay.
We estimated the height of the house before I sent this letter in. Unfortunately, it took a little while to get it surveyed.
Okay.
So I got it surveyed since I dropped the letter in, and it's actually 21 feet.
So you've lived there for a length of time, and your view, the light that you enjoy now. I'm trying to think. Can you explain that to us? What rooms are those, and what view do you have? And tell me a little more about it.
Well, the ground floor windows, the front of the house, the ground floor windows facing west, they get the evening sunlight. I have a view of the hills. It completely lights up the whole open plan ground floor of the house. And that would be just completely blocked by the house.
So Mr. Spalding was talking about a tree in the backyard of your neighbors that actually shadows your house. Can you tell us the difference between that shading versus the shading that you might incur from the house?
The house, the tree is like right over my roof, not near the windows. So it's like in the middle of the house. So it shades the roof. But the shading I'm worried about is the garden. For example, the tree is not near the garden. So the back of my house, the whole backyard would be shaded. This massive house just a few feet away from mine, looming up 35 feet, would be completely shade the back garden in the evening, which is the nicest light.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the driveway currently on the house next door to you uphill is where your windows are presently, correct?
All the driveways are on the same side going down the street.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Other questions for Mr. McNaughton? Thank you, sir. Lee Quintana?
Have to get my thoughts together just a second. I did not have an opportunity to see the addendum, so.
Can you speak up a little bit? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay. I did not have a chance to see the addendum, so I may be off on something that I say. I think there were three issues with this house. Is the impact on the neighbors' homes, the impact on public views, and the compatibility with the neighborhood. I did ask for a meeting with the applicant, and he did come and speak with me and my husband. And we all agreed that the hip roof was an improvement, that it preserved some of the public views coming along Pennsylvania and Palm Avenue. I presented him with three different options or possibilities that would improve the front, because we both agreed that the end gable made it more massive, and in fact it was even more massive on the downhill side than the original plan. My preferred option was to go back to the original. The applicant's preferred option was to go back to what he showed you tonight, which he said was original. It's very close. The original had an indent between the two dormers. As far as the landscaping went, we discussed that. He was not willing to discuss the rear yard at all, but was willing, as he stated, to accept a condition that the front yard landscaping be permanent. I think you've addressed some other things that I was concerned about with this house. One was the driveway and the pattern on the street. The second was that it's so close to the downhill neighbor. The inaccuracies in the height that both the downhill neighbor and I think my house and the house next door are presented as higher than they actually are. And I think given your instructions, he's probably met them unless your instructions also meant for him to consider the actual siting of the house. All the discussion is based on this particular design, and yes, it doesn't work very well if you move the house further to the west, but and let's see, one other thing I wanted to say was that in one of the letters it mentioned that we were saving a lot more trees. Yes, we are, and the front landscaping does screen our house much better and the street much better, but the trees being saved are because they had construction impacts, and the plan was changed to avoid those impacts. And this plan is very formal in the landscaping, and it has an immense amount of hardscape, which I think I showed you last week. If you want to see it again, I have it with me. Oh,
Wow,
I have
you
9
finished
seconds
that.
left.
That's a first. Congratulations. Are there any questions for Ms. Quintana? I actually have a question just to make sure I understand what you mean. When you say original that you discussed, I made Mr. Spalding go through artificial numbers that I assigned. Do you mean number 1 or do you mean number 3?
I didn't.
You weren't, okay, you weren't looking.
I wasn't with it, but
the first one is the one with the horizontal. The second one is the large front undivided gable, and the third one is the divided gables.
I guess it's the divided gable because there was an indentation in the floor
All right.
plan.
Just want to make sure. Any other questions?
Wait a minute, not the divided gable. I'm sorry. It was the dormers.
Yes.
But
sorry.
there was an indentation between the two dormers. In other words, it wasn't a flat plane, but if you look at the original floor plan, there was a slight indentation in those 2 bedrooms so that the wall plane between the 2 dormers was pushed back.
Okay. Other questions for Ms. Quintana? Thank you very much.
Can I just, because I actually stopped 9 seconds before, can I put my plan?
You have 9 seconds.
This is not totally accurate because I don't know how much landscaping was actually added here, but all the rest of the yellow is either the house, deck, or patio, or driveway. That's a huge amount of hardscape.
Questions for Ms. Quintana? Thank you. Anyone else that would like to speak with us about this application, which is a redesign at 357 Pennsylvania Avenue? If not, I'm going to ask the applicant or his representative to come back up. Mr. Rosenberg.
I think I turned in a card. My name Michael Rosenberg. I'm the
Yes, you did. Thank you.
landscape architect for the project. I guess I should just state that I don't think that the previous drawing was very accurate. You have the drawings on the wall behind you as well as I think in your packet, and there's quite a bit more landscaping than that great big yellow swath that you just saw. And if you have any questions regarding the changes we made to the landscaping to improve the screening, I'd be happy to answer them.
Other questions for Mr. Rosenberg? Commissioner Talsfor.
When you talk about I'm assuming that the hardscape, I don't even know what cover material, is permeable, correct?
Not all of hardscape would be permeable, no. Permeable means water
Yes.
through it?
Yes.
No, not every bit of it would
Oh,
be.
well, then can you,
We were suggesting that the driveway might be, though. That would be one place where we would certainly consider doing permeable
so
paving.
can you describe to me what that permeable material will be like? Are you, is it all, put together do you have space between it for,
Permeable really.
I mean,
just-
explain it to me, because I can't see it from
There-
that
there's-
drawing, that it really.
There's a variety of different materials that could fall into that category. I can give you examples. I mean, a gravel driveway would be permeable because it would not water would not sheet off of it. In other
Okay,
words,
so that's one material.
Stormwater wouldn't run to the street or into a drain basin of some sort. It
So
would
you.
permeate into the ground.
Yes, I understand that. So, but you haven't called out the exact material, is that?
I don't think we've decided on an exact material yet. There's quite a few different options that would fall into that category, and I don't think the owners have actually made that exact decision yet.
So this is a conceptual plan, isn't it?
Yes?
Okay.
Although the planting part of it, we're happy to conform to it and have it part of the record. I don't think anything on here is actually spelled out what particular materials are going to be used for walls or stairs or walkways or things, but this is kind of diagrammatic.
So the backyard paving, stonework or cement, I'm not sure what that's going to be, but that's all, you said it probably wouldn't be permeable?
Probably not. I don't think, again, we haven't, the backyard
about the
is
front?
conceptual. At this stage, it was just something to,
Okay, what about the front yard?
the driveway is labeled as a permeable material.
But the front,
The walkways,
no, right in front of the porches, what
that's
is?
a walkway so you have to get from the porch to the driveway or the porch to the street. I would call that a walkway or a front entry courtyard, whatever you want to call it. We had not labeled that as permeable material, no.
How large is that from the porch? Is it 20, what am I seeing there? From the porch to the raised bed?
Oh, it might be 10 feet. I don't have a scale with me. I actually don't
Okay.
have a scale.
All right, I needed an idea.
Commissioner Bourgeois, did you have your hand up?
Thank you.
Did you?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
So the town architect actually made a recommendation for the permeable driveway that we require a modular material. Is that along the lines of what you're thinking? And
That's one of the materials we would be considering. There's also another one that I've been working with your town engineer on for approval. He and I have been kind of throwing, there's so many things on the market, and it's such kind of a new, not a fad, but it's a new consideration to help reduce stormwater drainage. So there are things on the market that maybe you are not as familiar with, and some of those I'm trying to introduce to the town engineer, and we've been talking about some other options.
okay, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Sayoc?
Yes, I believe this question is for Mr. Spalding. So I don't know if you want to continue with the landscape architect.
No, that's fine.
first?
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Mr. Spalding, I appreciate the different iterations of design that you have here. I think one of my concerns that remains is just the location and proximity of the home to your downhill neighbor and the impact of that. And so, again, I know it was asked, but could you just again explain to me why you could not move the driveway so that it separates the home from the downhill neighbor? You mentioned about the cuts, the slope, but looking at the landscape, seeing that you're going to have some cuts for the swimming pool, I'd like to better understand why you couldn't just move the garage and the driveway downhill.
Well, let's see, if I were to move the house 8 feet from the right hand, or 10 feet from
Mr. Spalding, it may be helpful for you to put what you're looking at up so we can, or at least tell us which page number you are on so we can look at our binder.
Somebody took my site plan, so I'm working off of the engineering drawing here. I don't know if it's in your packet. It's the grading and drainage plan. Oh, thank you. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Okay, that's what I'm
Okay.
looking at. So if I were to move it 6 feet over, say, well, I can't move it 6 feet over because then it would block the driveway. So the only choice would be to flip-flop the whole property. So it would be a 10-foot setback on the west side, which would put our house floor elevation up at 532, and our back corner of the garage existing grade is at 517. So to stay under the 15-foot height limit, the highest I could get that garage floor would be about 522. So that would be 10 feet below the house floor. So it wouldn't work. You know, I'd be a full story down. So the only way it would work would be to change it to just a 2-car garage so that it wasn't as deep on the lot, so that the existing grade at the back corner of the garage was higher, up about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feet higher. Then there would only be about a 5-foot height difference between the house floor and the garage floor. So that would be a possibility, but I know my client would not like that configuration because it loses larger garage, and the uphill neighbor would also not like that. So while if it was up to me, I could perhaps make something work, but it's not what the program of my client is. A small garage.
Other questions? Commissioner Sayok?
So just so I understand, as it's currently designed, it's a 3-car garage then? Is that correct?
It's a tandem 3-car garage, right?
Okay. And so by moving it over from the impact, just so I understand the impacts, you're basically lessening the impact to your uphill neighbor to improve the impact to your downhill neighbor, and you're also changing it from a 3-car to a 2-car garage.
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
And that you then have a half a flight of stairs up into the house from your garage.
Okay.
Yeah,
We just need to have, whoever's talking needs to be at the podium, please.
Yeah, right now we just have a 2-foot height difference between the garage and the house. So that would grow to 5, and the garage would get smaller.
Commissioner Sayak, do you want to follow up, or you? Okay. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you.
So it's not insignificant changes.
I just have a visual question for either you or the landscaper. If you're Mr. McNaughton and you're looking out Pennsylvania Avenue, but you're looking to your left to the house, as you draw the landscaping now, what would you, as Mr. McNaughton, be looking at? What would you see along that whole line of the house?
You want to pull out the landscaping there?
I mean, I know what I see, but I'd rather have it be a clear.
So on in the side yard there, that's all just the existing tree is staying. The existing trees along that property line are all staying.
And how tall are those trees?
I don't know. The arborist report, I think, has photos of them.
This is what I'm trying to figure out. Is Mr. McNaughton now looking into a lot of trees? I think he is, but I just want to make sure that I've looked at this correctly.
Well, no. Well, there's right at where his house is. There's one significant tree, and then in the backyard there's many trees. But right where his house is, there's only one existing large tree. And then our landscaping puts new trees in the front yard, which is also in front of his house. And then the rest of the landscaping is just low shrubs, so that we're not planting big trees there to further shade his house.
this is what I want to be clear about. So it's all low shrubs along that house line
Correct.
between the two houses, right? And
Other than the existing tree.
Other than the existing trees. And that's what I just wanted to be certain that I was looking at this correctly.
Commissioner Tausfor.
Yeah, two follow-ups. One, just stay on that page. And so is there a plan to put a fence on that property?
Just an existing fence now that,
Well, there's an existing fence between the two properties, but will there be an additional fence between the properties?
we don't have one planned, but you repair it.
Okay, Mr. Lazarus, why don't you come up to Lazaris, I'm sorry, come up to the podium and tell us what the plan is.
Yes, I'd like to answer a couple of questions. Yeah,
Could
the
you
plan.
just start with that one?
Yes, the plan would be to build a brand-new fence, which is 6-foot fence regulation from where it is now. The fence, I think, existing is probably 4.5 or 5, so we'd build a new 6-foot fence, yes.
So that new fence would be on the, is that a good neighbor fence that you'll be working with Mr. McNaughton on?
Well,
or is that,
I'll work with Mr. McNaughton, or I'll just build the fence at my expense, one of the two.
Okay.
But it will be on the property line, or it'll be within a foot of my property, so if he doesn't want to build, I mean, if he doesn't want to share in building a fence, then I'll just build a fence.
have you ever thought of an open wire fence?
No, I will
Somewhat-
not do that. That would give me no privacy.
And then put landscaping on the outside of it so that it would become less of a wall.
No, I've not thought that far ahead. I've not thought that far forward because, I didn't really think the fencing was an issue. I mean, there's town ordinances about fencing, and that's.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just asking. the
I would
question
try to be a
because it
good
seems
neighbor
to be-
with Mr. McNaughton. I would try to be a good neighbor, and I would try to preserve a little bit of the view, whatever view he has at this time, or he appears to have at this time. There's some things about Mr. McNaughton's letter I'd like to address. First of all,
Wait a minute,
Oh, wait.
Mr. Lazaris. Your team had 3 minutes, and now we're asking questions. So I don't want to have just
okay.
off-the-cuff speaking unless a question has been addressed to you. So,
I mean, I reached.
commissioners, are there questions for Mr. Lazaris?
No, but I
Okay.
wanted to finish up with
You wanted to
Mr.
finish about the
Spalding,
fence,
yeah.
but not.
No, not with the fence, but I had.
Okay, you have a specific, different, new, and
Question
exciting
for-
question for Mr. Spalding?
Oh, it's exciting.
Okay, so Mr. Spalding, please.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You made a comment about, when you were explaining to Commissioner Sayoc about the garage, and there'd be difference, and there'd be steps and et cetera, et cetera. So it brings up, it triggers something in my head, and that is because this, the topography of this street is at somewhat of a hillside. Was any thought given at all to stepping the house up? Right now, it looks like it's just sort of set there. Do you know what I mean? It's not, I mean, I was thinking that if it could be stepped a bit, it might relieve more of the setback issue that causes the light concern that Mr. McNaughton has.
Well, my client didn't want to, it wanted all the main floor to be on one level, but to lessen the height, we have cut it in on the uphill side so that the proposed floor level is equal to the existing grade at the uphill side there. So it's on the uphill side, it's cut 2 feet down into grade to lessen that height.
Any other questions for Mr. Spalding, Mr. Rosenberg, or Mr. Lazaris? Okay, thank you very much. Oh, Commissioner Bourgeois.
Just one final confirmation. When asked earlier about how much you could move the house over, you kind of just mentioned you could probably move it over 2 feet. How much of a significant effort is that to do? Or is that just kind of a gut reaction?
Well, I could move it over 2 feet without affecting the access into the garage or the access into the house, although my client has told me he's reluctant to do that.
Okay.
Okay. I think that answers the question. That
I
you
wouldn't
don't
mind-
that you don't want to do it. So
I wouldn't mind hearing if
okay,
he has
Mr.
something
Lazares.
additional to add.
You know, the setback on that side yard is, by code, is 8 feet, and I've moved the house 10 feet. And Mr. McNaughton's house, the problem is he's on the smallest lot in that entire neighborhood. He's on a lot of less than 5,000 feet, and his house takes up the entire lot with really no backyard at all, but a narrow strip, probably not much wider than that table. I would, if it was my choice, I'd rather have 2 more feet of landscaping and open space on the house. If 2 more feet and moving the house 2 more feet and giving him 12 feet and then 10 feet for the second floor would alleviate some of the issues, I would probably agree to do that. You know, we studied this. We didn't, just randomly put the driveway on the other side. We looked at how it interfered with the neighbor on the uphill side. And there was a lot more interference if I flipped the house, because initially we had tried to flip the house and put the garage on the other side. On Mr. McNaughton's side, he has, I think, 2 windows. If you were out there and looked, all there is one big shed roof, and he's got 2 windows. And there were some bushes I took down because it was very overgrown, but before that, he really had no view at all. If I hadn't taken down, the overgrowth, I don't think he would have had much of a view. But if I was to flip the garage also on the other side, it would infringe on the neighbor who looks at my house the most, because his windows are all on that side. Mr. McNaughton only has 2 windows, I think, in the front that, with any fence at all, would cover that up, and any landscaping would cover that up. Also, if I flipped the house on the garage on the other side, the house would be another 7 feet up in the air. And if you look at the diagram that was done, the houses are stepping down the hill. Also, Mr. McNaughton, on the other side of his house, the driveway faces his house. So, I'm not moving my driveway, and I'm the only one in the neighborhood that has a driveway on that side. It's a little bit of both. It's probably 50%. I'm also at a 23% coverage. I mean, the problem you have is when you have remember, my lots, I bought 2 lots, and the town's policy has been in that area to combine lots and not, so I wouldn't build 2 houses. So we have a 16,000 square foot lot next to a 4,900 square foot lot. So there's going to be some discrepancies, but I felt, and looking at it, this was the only side you could put the garage on and make it work, and it infringed less on the neighbor with all the windows, and not Mr. McNaughton, who I don't even see his house, all I see is his roof. Also is the way the house is now in the garage and the extra story. It's blocking any view Mr. McNaughton has of the backyard. It's pretty terrible. In fact, the neighbor on the other side of him said they can't wait till I take that down because it will help with their view. So this was thought out. We've been working on this 9 or 10 months, and we've tried to come up with a design and something that would not only comply with the neighborhood, which, I've gone to your architect now 3 times, and he thinks it would, but would also, appease all the neighbors. I just can't appease a neighbor that, remember, his lot was one time 11,000 square feet. Someone subdivided it and built 2 small lots on a 52
Mr. Lazares, I
lot.
think you've gone beyond the question,
Yeah.
so I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I don't see any. So I am going to close the public portion of the hearing and let the commissioners first if they have any questions for staff. Commissioner Erickson.
I have a series of interrelated questions for the staff. So the side setback for 347 adjacent to 357, is it less than 8 feet?
Correct.
So there was an accommodation on that lot for less than the required setback.
I don't know the history particularly, but I believe the house was built quite a few decades ago.
Right, but I mean, it wouldn't be in conformance with the required setbacks today.
Correct. It has a non-conforming setback.
The proposed house at 357 is setback 10 feet as proposed, which is in compliance with the required 8-foot setback, correct?
Yes, it is greater than the 8-foot setback.
Is there a burden on a owner of a property that's adjacent to a property that doesn't meet the setback requirement to set their house back further in order to make up for that distance that wasn't provided on the lot adjacent to them.
There is no town code requirement that this property owner at 357 make up for the difference in the non-conforming setback on 347.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? I'll look to commission then for hopefully a motion. Does anyone have a motion? Okay, see you next meeting.
I don't.
Do you have a motion?
I don't have a motion.
Does anybody have a motion?
You want a motion?
I
Not
do.
a discussion.
Discussion follow the motion. Commissioner Bourgeois, you're my hero.
Okay, I'll throw something out there and see if it sparks some discussion. So I really appreciate the redesign and the effort that went into it. I think you've substantially addressed the commission's concerns. I think we have a much better product. There's never, very rarely is there something that comes before us where all parties are satisfied. So I am going to make a motion that we approve architecture and site application S-12-028 with the third design, the one that we got in the desk item today. I would also request that that be moved over an additional 2 feet, and that we add a requirement per the request of the town architect that the permeable material be either a modular material or one acceptable to staff that has a very high quality appearance. I'd like that added as a condition. And I can find that this project is categorically exempt pursuant to section 15303 of the CEQA as adopted by town in Exhibit 2. And I can make the required findings as required by section 29-10-09030E of the town code for the demolition of a single family residence. And I can make the required considerations for granting and approval of an architecture and site application, and determine that the project is in compliance with the residential design guidelines, and that it's subject to the attached conditions with the additions I added and the development plans that we got in our desk item today. So that's my motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Bourgeois. Is there a second? Okay.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Smith. Now discussion. Commissioner Talasfor.
Yeah, to the maker of the motion, regarding the landscape, could we put in the motion that that permeable subject and the final landscape plan come back for, what do we call it? Not a review of the planning commission, but a, how do I say it? We'd like to see it. How do we do that? What is that called? Somebody help me out on staff.
It would be an informational item.
We did this, I think, Ms. Bailey, with a signage request where once something came in, staff would get it and then send us an information item. If we had some kind of question or concern, then we could put it back on our agenda. Is that correct or not?
You would actually have the comments referred to staff, and we would work it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that?
Yeah, that's what I'd
Sounds
like.
like
And the reason I would request that is only because it's so undefined, and it's in a historic area.
So let me understand the request. If it's
Okay.
coming back as an informational item, we won't be taking any action on it?
It would not come back to the commission. It would just be a memo sent out that we are planning on improving this. And if you had any comments, please let us know.
Okay, and that would be prior to staff approval of the final
Correct.
plan? Okay, yeah, I'll add that to the motion.
And Commissioner Smith, is that agreeable to you as the seconder? Commissioner Erickson?
Clarification question to the maker of the motion. You used the word request to move to move the house 2 feet uphill, I suppose. So that's, you didn't intend for that to be a requirement, but a request.
Well, maybe I chose my words poorly. I meant it to be a part of the motion and therefore a requirement. Yeah, thank you for clarifying that.
And Commissioner Smith, I take it that's your understanding? Okay. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. The motion's been made for approval with modified conditions by Commissioner Bourgeois, seconded by Commissioner Smith. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? None. It passes unanimously. However, there are appeal rights. Ms. Bailey.
This decision is appealable to the town council. Appeals must be filed within 10 days. There is a fee for filing an appeal, and the forms are located upstairs in the town clerk's office.
Which brings us to item number 4, subdivision application M-10-007, environmental impact report EIR-12-002 at 381 Peninsula Avenue. Commissioners, I'm sure you recall that we've seen this before. I've asked staff to just give us an overview of the process and status of this application as it came back to us from the town council, and exactly what we are doing tonight with respect to the subdivision request, which I believe is the only thing before us. So Ms. Mosley, Ms. Propp, or Ms. Bailey?
Yes, before you tonight is an application for a 2-lot subdivision, also known as a parcel map or tentative map, and certification of an EIR for the subdivision. The application is not to consider what should be built on the proposed vacant parcel, as that would be a separate application process if the subdivision is approved. The EIR would be used as the basis for environmental review for development of the proposed newly created parcel. For background information, the 2-lot subdivision was originally approved by the Development Review Committee. The decision of the DRC was appealed to the Planning Commission. The DRC's decision was upheld by the Planning Commission, and the appeal was denied. The decision of the Planning Commission was then appealed to the Town Council. And based on new information regarding the potential historical nature of the property, the Town Council remanded the application to the Planning Commission pending further environmental analysis, which resulted in a focused EIR. Due to the remand and the additional environmental analysis, the application is no longer being reviewed as an appeal. This is a de novo hearing, which means the public hearing process for this matter is starting over. As a reminder, and as noted in your report, pursuant to State Subdivision Map Act, specific findings for a subdivision must be made in order to deny a subdivision, not to approve the subdivision. Pursuant to the State Subdivision Map Act, if any of these findings cannot be made, the deciding body must approve the application. I'd also like to note that the town's environmental consultant and historian are present tonight and available if you have any questions for them.
Any questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
There's information in our packet about the fact that this was originally 2 parcels that have been joined together. Do we know the orientation of how those 2 parcels were divided? Was it longitudinally, or was it similar to what's being proposed?
It was the opposite. It was the original lot line ran
Parallel to Wissahickon?
correct.
Other questions? Thank you very much, Ms. Mosley. I have a card from Gregory Howell.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gregory Howell, and I reside on Glenridge Avenue in Los Gatos. Before you tonight is a 2-lot subdivision on Pennsylvania Avenue. As a reminder, this 2-lot subdivision was brought to the Planning Commission before and was approved by the Planning Commission unanimously. After that meeting, we were asked by the Town Council to prepare an EIR, which I'm sure you've had a chance to read in preparation for tonight's meeting. The EIR is very detailed, and we have 2 experts with us this evening that can answer any questions you may have regarding it. Basically, The EIR report supports and confirms the unanimous approval we received from the Planning Commission some months ago, and we will look forward to your continued support this evening. At this time, I would like to make myself and our experts available for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. And if you'd introduce your experts so that we know who to address questions to if we'd like to.
I'll let Marnie introduce them.
They're the town consultants.
Oh, they're the town consultants. Okay. Any questions for Mr. Howell or the environmental consultants? Commissioner Bourgeois.
If Ms. Mosley maybe could introduce the, I'm looking for someone with cultural, historical resources. I don't know who would be.
That would be the historian Franklin.
Okay. Would now be the time to ask?
Yeah, sir, just yes, please come forward to the podium, introduce yourself, and Commissioner Bourgeois has a question for you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I'm Franklin Maggi. I'm a partner with Archives and Architecture.
Great, thank you, sir. The EIR was very helpful, answered most of my questions, but I had a question about the historical nature of a neighborhood pattern. A lot of the discussion was about the structure, but can you consider, the historic structure or the layout of the parcels as a historic feature?
The layout of the lots is really a legal issue, and it's not an environmental issue. Subsequent to adoption of a subdivision, there may be a pattern of development, and when we look at the historic character of a neighborhood, we look at the pattern of development which may have resulted from the subdivision, but not the subdivision itself.
Any other questions? I don't see any, so thank you very much. I don't have any. Ms. Quintana. Let's see if you can beat your 2 minutes and 52 seconds. 51, sorry.
Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. There were a couple of things in the report that troubled me. First of all, there were several historical reports and that also dealt with CEQA, and I think the question of whether this project is being considered as a whole under CEQA was not addressed in the EIR. It's clear that once the subdivision is approved, there would be a house built on the back lot, and there would be demolition of the existing buildings, and that is going to be confined by the constraints of that site, the easements, etc. So I think there's an issue there that needs to be addressed as part of the EIR. Second thing that I was troubled by was a couple of repeated statements that indicated that the determination of non-significance as a historical resource was based on the consultant's report in consultation with the town that it did not meet the town's regulations. There's a catch-22 in that, because the town never established criteria, but they did establish intent. And I think that the intent needs to be looked at in the absence of actual criteria. Otherwise, we never get anything that isn't already established as a significant historic resource, landmark, except if the town council wishes to. And the pattern of development issue. The pattern that the town looked at in the EIR is quite different than this. Logically, the project is on Pennsylvania. You would look at houses on Pennsylvania, maybe around the corner on Walnut and Wissahickon. Clearly, the pattern is rectangular. And even if this lot were split, the pattern of the house on the existing lot is rectangular and to the side, leaving a large side yard. A house built on the other lot, meeting minimum town requirements, will not have that same development pattern, and I think that's an issue, whether it needs to be addressed in the EIR or as a part of the project approval, i.e. the subdivision with conditions. I don't know, but you know, we're not doing a very good job of saving our local resources.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Ms. Quintana? Thank you. You can leave that up unless you want it back. Anyone else who'd like to speak to us about this application? I don't see anyone. So Mr. Howell, if you want to address anything you've heard, now's your opportunity.
Well, since it was brought up about the pattern, this map doesn't actually reflect what's currently out there. I did look at this before the meeting because I thought it might come up. The house directly across the street from this house on Pennsylvania has a home built behind it on Wissahickon, just exactly as we're proposing on Pennsylvania, so it does follow the pattern. And if you go down the street on the other corners, on Hernandez and Wissahickon, it does the same thing. So it does follow the pattern of the existing neighborhood. Thank you.
Mr. Howell, I actually have a question. Why did you decide to split it the way you did?
The house where it currently sits would be very close, if not maybe a few inches off the line down the middle, was one issue. Secondly, when we met with the neighbor next door who originally opposed this subdivision, he told me that he wants, if it does go forward, he wants the lot where we proposed it, he would be more against having it go down the middle that way. And so we were working with the neighbor and as well as the restraints of the current house.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Sayak?
Mr. Howell, could you again re-explain, you mentioned that the home across Pennsylvania has a home behind. If you could, using this diagram, just, if you could take
Mr. Howell, can you take the microphone with you, please? It comes out, just slip it out.
So this is the property in question, 381. Across the street, there is a house on Wissahickon built here, which is in the backyard of this house. If you were to go down here and look at the other corner lots, they're the same way. The house faces Pennsylvania, and there's a home behind it. So it does follow the pattern of Wissahickon.
Any other questions? Commissioner Talaspour?
Would you just draw the where you're proposing the second lot? Would you draw?
I'll do my best. I believe it has 120 feet of frontage on Wissahickon, and it would be, I'm going to say somewhere right around here, and it goes this way. I believe it leaves approximately 140 feet. Correct me, Marnie, if I'm wrong. I believe there's 140 feet left this way. So it is still a very deep, large lot.
Just to clarify, so you're saying that the back lot would be 100 feet and the front lot would be 140?
What I'm saying is the frontage on Wissahickon, as I recall, is around 120 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then from the balance to Pennsylvania, as I recall, is somewhere around 140 feet.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Howell. I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and see if members of the commission have any questions for staff. Okay, I actually have one, and my question is, with respect to our powers or limited powers under the Subdivision Map Act, do we have any discretion in determining how, when, or why a lot, or which direction a lot is subdivided? Or do we come in and use the parameters of the Subdivision Map Act with respect to the division that's been drawn or submitted?
Well, the subdivision would be considered under current town code requirements. The split in the original position wouldn't meet town code requirements.
No, so my question is, okay, so knowing that the Subdivision Map Act indicates basically you must approve a subdivision unless you can make one of the following findings. Yes, I think that based on the information we have, that what's been submitted qualifies. We couldn't make one of the findings. But my question is, do we have any power or discretion to say, you know, gosh, we'd rather have it split a different way? Or do we just have to make our decision based upon what's been submitted? So, for example, somebody gives us a house and we say, that's too high, go back and change it. Under the Subdivision Map Act, do we get to change it, or are we just considering the proposal that's in front of us?
You can request a reconfiguration. However, as Barney had mentioned, it would need to meet town code requirements in terms of the lot frontage, the depth, and the setbacks of the existing house would have to be met.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Once again, I'm going to look to my fellow commissioners for what I hope would be a motion. Okay, I'm going to use my prerogative as chair. I think it's okay to make a motion then. And my motion would be to approve subdivision application M-10-007 and environmental impact report EIR-12-002. In order to do that, I don't think I have to make separate findings with respect to the EIR other than what's required by CEQA. Is that correct? That no significant impacts have been found. I'm sympathetic to the pattern and the historic arguments and the cultural resource arguments, but we do have a document in front of us that, according to California Environmental Quality Act law, and I'm going to get in trouble with Commissioner Sayak and Commissioner Bourgeois probably, has not found any significant impacts, so I can make that finding. As indicated from Ms. Mosley at the outset, under the Subdivision Map Act, we must approve the application in front of us unless we can find that the proposed map is not consistent with the applicable general and specific plans. We cannot do that. That the design or improvement of the proposed subdivision is not consistent with applicable general and specific plans. We cannot do that. And again, this is just with respect to the subdivision of the lot. That the site is not physically suitable for this type of development. We cannot do that. That the site is not physically suitable for the proposed density of the development. We cannot do that because the proposed divided lots do meet our town code requirements. That the design of the subdivision or the proposed improvements are likely to cause substantial environmental damage or substantially and avoidably injure fish or wildlife or their habitat. We cannot do that because we now have a complete EIR in front of us which has found that there are no significant impacts. That the design of the subdivision or type of improvement is likely to cause serious public health problems. We cannot make that finding. That the design of the subdivision or the type of improvement will conflict with assessments acquired by the public at large for access through or use of the property within the proposed subdivision. We cannot do that either because we're not aware of any kind of public access over those lots. So because we cannot make any of the findings required by the California state law, my motion is to approve the subdivision. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Smith. Discussion, questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you. I think I'll likely be supporting the motion. I hesitated to make a motion or second this for one reason, and I think it's very clear that we have to make these certain findings to deny it. And I think the only finding that I think gives me some hesitation is the second one, that the design or improvement of the proposed subdivision is not consistent with the applicable general and specific plans. If you look at some of the general plan policies, you can make a case both ways, and we've heard evidence on both sides. For example, to preserve, enhance the existing character and sense of place in a residential neighborhood. I mean, that's, you have arguments on both sides of it there. Consistent with that of the immediate neighborhood. Again, we've heard arguments on both sides of that. To provide for well-planned, careful growth. So, some of these goals and policies are a little fuzzy, and this is where a decision like this becomes difficult. But when I weigh the evidence, I don't think there's enough for me to make that finding. So that was my hesitancy, but I will be supporting the motion.
Other questions or comments on the motion? Commissioner Talsfor.
And to that point, Commissioner Bourgeois, I probably will not be supporting the motion because for me, even though this hasn't been designated historic, there is that historic nature of that area that is very strong. And I think we have to somehow think about how to be careful and considerate about addressing that because we could lose it quickly. So for that reason, I can find that I don't see this as improving the historic nature of this house and lot that is very estate-like. And as I read the map, I thought, to me, those were proposed lots. I don't think they were actually divided. But, so I really can't be supporting it just because of that. So I probably will be the only one. But that is my prerogative. Thank you.
It certainly is your prerogative. Thank you for your comments. Any other comments or questions on the motion? Okay, I'm going to call the question. The motion's been made by the chair to approve with the subdivision, seconded by Commissioner Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So it passes 5-1. Commissioner Talsfor opposing. Are there appeal rights?
Yes, this decision is appealable to the town council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days. There is a fee for filing an appeal, and the appeal forms are located upstairs in the town clerk's office.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Which brings us to item number 5, Architecture and Site Application S-12-038, 236 and 238 Bachman Avenue. Requesting approval to demolish a two-family dwelling and construct a single-family dwelling with a detached garage with reduced rear setbacks and property zoned R-1D:LHB. Anything to add or point out to us in the staff report?
No.
Thank you, Ms. Savage. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you. I have a question about the removal of housing stock. The staff report says that it's basically, if I'm paraphrasing, that it's okay because we have other projects in town where we're gaining housing stock. So is that, I'm just confused as to how we're supposed to look at this because the policy is about, and we have general plan policy about the variety of housing types and sizes. And I know these are small units, and small units in that part of town aren't very common. So I'm struggling with the loss of a unit of that size in that neighborhood. And have we in other cases have we said that's okay because we're gaining those types of units in other parts of town?
Similar cases are those where within these historic districts there have been single-family homes with an interior second unit. So it's similar in this case in the sense that it was originally a single-family home and then it was remodeled to be two families. On those lots where it's a single family with an interior second unit, more often than not, it's an interior second unit because it doesn't have the square footage to be a two-family dwelling. And when the town required property owners to come in and get permits for secondary dwelling units, those lots that were less than 8,000 square feet to qualify for a duplex obtain secondary dwelling units. This is different in the sense that it has 8,000 square feet and so it would qualify for a two-family dwelling. So to answer your question, the similar projects are getting rid of those interior secondary dwelling units.
I have actually a follow-up question. Is there a different analysis? I'm assuming because it's a duplex that's smaller in the Almond Grove that it would qualify as a below market price unit. I'm thinking. If that's true, and I don't know if it is there a different analysis if we're losing a BMP unit?
This is not a BMP unit.
Commissioner Sayak.
It's a similar thread of thought. Looking at the the goal HOU 1-1, expand the choice of housing opportunities for all economic segments of the community. And again, you're removing a housing stock, but instead of counting it as a unit, do we take into account the types of unit types we have in town and removing that unit type specifically?
Yes, you could take that into your analysis. So it's your purview to go through the goals and policies of the general plan and to make a determination whether or not you feel the removal of a unit meets the general plan.
But as a town, we do not actually have a tally of single-family residential versus multifamily versus duplex. Do we keep those counts?
In the general plan, there might have been a breakout. I don't know how specific it was, but no, tonight we don't have that information to provide to you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Mr. Shakiri, I have just one card.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. My name is Omid Shakeri. I'm the applicant and the property owner in this case. We are essentially planning on building a house, to live in. And currently, yes, there is a duplex there. As I went through analysis in the explanation I gave you, is that one of the units is pretty small, very awkward floor plan. And if essentially we move in, we won't be renting, the unit. So even if we expand the property and still keep a unit, we won't be renting it. So, there's no, essentially at this time, we will be using as a single family, for our use. I've read I read the staff report and conditions of approvals, and I agree with the conditions, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Shakiri? Commissioner Smith.
Mr. Shakiri, you met with me anyways during the Historic Preservation Committee meetings, and I started to look at the plans, but I thought I would just ask you and move this along. The town architect suggested that the porch was not, the depth of the porch was not deep enough, and I don't recall if you changed that or not. I know we commented on one of our meetings with you, but as I'm looking at it, I'm not sure if you have complied with the suggestion of Mr. Cannon.
Yes, we did. We expanded the porch. I think it was like 4.5 feet. We expanded it to 7 feet as he had recommended.
Other questions? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, essentially the depth of the porch was increased to 7 feet as his recommendation.
Thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Talsfor.
I wanted to review the materials that you plan on using for
Yes.
the materials on the outside of the house,
Yes.
stucco and wood.
Yes.
Can you tell me the style of stucco you're thinking of?
We're looking at doing a called an old town or semi-smooth finish. So it'll be, it won't be like orange peel. It won't have a rough finish like some of the more Mediterranean.
The house right now is wood, and it when I was in the neighborhood visiting it and the surrounding streets, most of the homes in that area are wood. There are a few select homes that are stucco. Most of those are single story, and they have that certain finish that tells us it was built a long time ago. So my question to you is, would you consider using a combination of materials? So, and the reason I'm asking is that this will be a new house on the street. And sometimes when other materials are used besides stucco, it doesn't stand out as new. And since this is a historic area, it would, using a combination of maybe shingle and wood, you know, and a good example is on the corner of West Main Street and Bayview Avenue.
Yes.
Would you consider revising your materials list to better fit into to what's already there?
You know, one of the things essentially we looked at when we were designing, or the architect was designing this and was consulting me on it, is we looked at the craftsman style, and then we look at what's appropriate for a craftsman style homes. Of course, craftsman style have both, of course, all kinds. It has stucco, it has siding, and it has a shingle. A couple of reasons that I decided to go with the stucco. One was that it's a mixture of stucco and wood.
Well, it's only a wood band, isn't it? And how?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but actually, no, under the gables are.
Could you
yes.
show that to us?
Of course.
Well,
You can just, if you have a sheet in front of us that you want to refer us to, we have our packets and we can look here. You don't have to put it on the screen.
that would be at
on sheet A3.
A3, yes.
I think if you look at under the gables, the vertical lines, those are actually wood. Those are actually wood siding. So we essentially used 3 types of material: wood siding, stucco, and also we used rocks as a accent, which kind of more enhanced the.
Yes, I see that.
And I felt that there are lots of wood siding there. There are lots of stucco, but there was nothing there that had the combination. I thought that would not only keep the architectural motif of craftsman style, but also is something new that doesn't look new. You know, it's something new that, in the sense that it looks, he has the architectural design of the craftsman era, but it's something, it's not stucco only, or it's not wood only. That's what essentially I'm trying to get at.
Say that again.
Okay. The point I'm trying to make is that there are many houses in that neighborhood that have wood siding only. They have wood siding and shingle mixture, and they have stucco. There are not very many houses that have a combination of wood and stucco, the way we've designed it. We also accented with river rocks. So our goal was, when we chose the material, is to choose something that is kind of unique, but it still has the craftsman characteristics that is prominent in that area.
I understand what you're saying. Did you ever think about putting just a wood siding on the second floor?
No.
That would kind of continue the wood boards that you have under the gables, the gable roofs.
Yeah, I didn't. One of the reasons actually was because I felt it makes it a little too busy, too many materials. We just used the stucco and accented it with the wood and rock, rather than having, lots of wood and lots of stucco. I thought that to accent it would highlight it much nicer and better than try to use predominantly 2 different material. And I think another reason is on the maintenance. The stucco, the maintenance is much easier than wood. So, in 20 years when I'm not around anymore, the stucco is going to be a much nicer. It's going to hold up much better.
Well, it also cracks sometimes. Yes. So, in cases like this, because this is a demolition and you're in a historic area, and I don't see any materials, so it's really tough for me to judge what this stucco is going to look like. I have no idea. I only heard your words, but that you could change your mind.
Well, we can actually, it could be actually the commission, if they feel strongly to have we could actually put a condition that we use in a smooth finish, because that's what essentially we are. We're not going to use rough finishes like, orange.
And I'm
peel
not
or
even, well, okay. I'm not even sure if a smooth finish is what you put on this style of house. Yeah.
Actually, up on Bachman, past Glen Ridge, past the park, there is a house on the left-hand side that seems to be relatively new, that they have, essentially they used a kind of a smooth finish, there, which looks very nice. One of the reasons
That's going out of
I
the
looked at it.
historic area.
Commissioner Talsford, let me just stop you for a second and get some clarification from staff, because I know that Historic Preservation looked at the house, and in my experience on Historic Preservation Committee, that committee pays careful attention to materials in a historic area. So let me just see if staff can tell us, or if Commissioner Erickson or Commissioner Smith can tell us what they recall. Was there a materials review?
That was going to be my next question.
Okay.
Thank you for taking care of it.
The Historic Preservation Committee did look at the materials, and I specifically remember them talking about using real stone for the stone along the porch, and using real wood for the wood that's indicated on the plans.
Commissioner Erickson or Commissioner Smith, can you help us out with it? Was any recollection you might have about discussion of stucco, if any?
I don't
Commissioner Erickson?
recall, sorry.
Okay.
I don't recall any discussion at the Historic Preservation Committee that talked about the proportion of mixture that questioned that, but it was observations as Ms. Savage noted about using real wood and appropriate river rock stone, which is what they are proposing. So.
Okay, sorry, Commissioner Talsford, do you have other questions?
Well, no, it's just that there was not a discussion about, what I'm understanding is that there was not a discussion about style of stucco. No one reviewed that. And that's the majority of the house.
Let's ask the one other person that might know. It's Mr. Shakari.
Well, again, as I recall, that when we went through the Historic Commission, they did discuss the material. Again, as Ms. Savage indicated, specifically they asked for real wood and real stone. As far as the stucco, they were well aware that there was a stucco on there. I don't recall whether they asked what texture. And I guess maybe I'll ask it, what is, on the stucco, what is your preference on the texture? Is there a preference you have? He's asking.
Ms. Bailey.
I would just like to note that the Historic Preservation Committee is very particular in reviewing materials and stucco. They have gotten into the details of the type of stucco on historic, not for this application, but for historic walls. They really get into the coloring, the details and all that. So I can guarantee that the Historic Preservation Committee did take that into consideration.
Nonetheless, I'm sure that if and when we get to the point where a motion is made by whoever it might be made, if a consideration of the particular type of finish for the stucco needs to be considered, or someone would like it to be considered here, that could be part of a motion or a new condition. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, and I would suggest, if the commission is in favor, that if they do recommend that they send it back to the Historic Preservation Committee for final determination.
Okay. Commissioner Talsford, other questions? And anybody else with a question? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, sir. I had a question. As you've been watching earlier today, we usually get a lot of comments and concerns from neighbors. And when I was visiting the site, the house to your right at 228 Bachman, so as you're facing your house, the one to the right, so the one closer to Santa Cruz Avenue.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a big change for them on that side, going from 1 story to 2 story. The wall on that side looked pretty massive. That was the only angle of the house that gave me any concern about the massing of the house. Have you spoken to your neighbors, and has anyone expressed any concern about the mass of the house?
Yes, well, I did spoke with the neighbors. Actually, the letters that you have is the ones that I hand out. The particular the particular neighbor on that side, that is, he actually, I sent him a letter saying that, you know, this is what we're doing, and he emailed me requesting the information. I did email him back all of the plans, and he didn't, you know, he didn't call. He has my contact information and, you know, an email, and I did not receive another follow-up call from him. So.
And how long have the story poles been up?
Since I was beginning of August. It's been more than
2 weeks.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then I have one final question. So the back corner of the property where the Santa Clara Valley Water District easement is.
Yes.
I know you don't have a landscaping plan or anything. So kind of behind the garage, there's a reed back
Yes.
there. Do you have any plans for that area, or?
Of course, we will be landscaping that area.
So you're going to take out that existing vegetation?
Yes, we will be actually neatly landscaped. Yes.
Okay. The reason I'm asking is because that's a highly invasive plant.
Yes.
And the water district actually spends several $1 million a year trying to get that out, and so it should be handled in a very particular way.
Yes.
And so I may, if you're open to that, I would like to suggest that as a condition of approval, that material be handled appropriately and disposed of properly, because that's the way it spreads, is people throwing it in the back of a truck and it blowing around. And
sure.
So.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Thanks.
Commissioner Sayak.
Mr. Shakari, it sounds like you've spent some time with our planning staff as well as the different committees discussing design. I wanted to ask if you had any conversations when you were considering the home or afterwards about the idea of demolishing the second unit and the fact that it would require findings for that to occur, and your thought process behind the chance that you may not get that permission to demolish the second unit.
Essentially, we would be expanding the house and not using the second unit. As I mentioned, that we would be, we won't be renting that one unit. So we will just simply, not use that second unit.
Other questions? Okay, thank you, sir. I do see somebody else, but I have a feeling she might be with you.
Yes, she is.
Okay. So I'm going to close the public portion of the hearing and ask commissioners if they have questions for staff. Commissioner Sayak.
Yes, I do. A question of staff. How does the process work when you do have a second unit? If you have a second unit, must you rent it out?
No.
No. And so if you're looking to, in this specific case, if you're looking to remodel, and you don't get the permission for the second unit, but you're using that space and that footprint to expand, I guess if it's a finding that you need findings to demolish the second unit, but you don't have that, how can you then expand the rest of the unit? I guess is it part and parcel of the application?
If somebody wanted to expand the existing unit, I'm not sure if I'm getting all your question correct, they would, during the building permit process, we would make sure that the existing second unit, or the other living unit in this case, which is a duplex, is maintained. So it would have to be maintained as a separate living quarters. And what some people have done, which is legal, is they've put a door in between the units with the locking device where like a motel where it can lock on both sides. So they can therefore use the units, but it technically is still two separate living units.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Talswell.
Yeah, clarification. You have referred to this as a duplex, and yet it doesn't, is it really a duplex? it looks like just two living, one living space that grew out of it.
Well, it's 2 units, which is called duplexes. It's not like the normal type of duplex that
it's
you.
not normal duplex, thank you.
But it is
Okay.
not a second unit in that it qualifies as a 2-family unit.
Okay, I just wanted to make clear of that.
Commissioner, are you done? Right. Commissioner Bourgeois?
I may have missed this in the staff report, but was it originally constructed as a single-family home and then later converted to a duplex?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Commissioner Talsford, did you have a follow-up?
Maybe I'll ask.
No.
I think it's probably for discussion. among
Okay.
the Commissioners.
Okay. I'm going to now, once again, look to the commission for a motion, I hope. Mr. Talsford.
I would like to contemplate making a motion, but my reservation is I'm looking at the little house in between these two bigger homes, and I'm wondering if the residential design guidelines were followed here, and that I don't see that evidenced. We're so far down the road on this, how can you address that now? So, but that's a comment. I will go ahead and make a motion to approve. Approve architecture and site application S12-038 at 236 and 238 Bachman Avenue. Requesting approval to demolish a two-family dwelling and construct a single-family dwelling with a detached garage with reduced rear setbacks on property zoned R1D, LHP, APN 510-14054. Make the findings in Exhibit 2. They're lengthy, and I think the commission has read them. So unless I need to, I won't repeat them. And I would like to add that the materials list, or the materials for this house, be sent back to Historic Preservation Committee for review. And that'd be materials, finishes, and color.
Before I ask for a second, procedurally, can the Planning Commission make a motion that carves out a remand, what's essentially a remand? Can we do that?
You would just be referring not the architecture back, but the actual, as Ms. Talsford said, the materials, finishes, and colors.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'm the second person tonight. I second.
Commissioner Smith. Second, but certainly not second in our hearts. Any comments or questions on the motion? Commissioner Bourgeois.
To the maker of the motion, I'd like to potentially add another condition of approval that the giant reed, which is the common name of the species in the back, be bundled and covered and transported appropriately to a landfill for disposal.
I would agree to that, and thank you for catching that.
And the seconder? Okay. I'm sympathetic to, I think it's a well-designed house. I do think it's compatible with the neighborhood. I think I like the design. I like the use of materials. I was a little concerned about the bulkiness coming from that one vantage point from the neighbor to the right. But all in all, I thought it was a good design. What's giving me some pause is losing a unit, and it's a slippery slope for us if we're trying to preserve, like our general plan says, a variety of housing types and sizes, and support the preservation and conservation of existing housing units. If we keep taking these highly desirable neighborhoods and we're losing what in essence is, it's not a BMP, but it is an affordable unit in a highly desirable neighborhood. If we keep losing those and pushing them out to other parts of town, are we really meeting the intent of the general plan? And so looking at this one project, you know, in a vacuum, it's no problem. But when you start looking at the bigger picture and what our general plan policies are trying to achieve by having diversity of housing types in all around town, it's causing me a little hesitation. So I honestly don't know how I'm going to vote right now.
Commissioner Sack.
That's a good segue, Commissioner Bourgeois. Thank you. And again, I do want to compliment you on the design, and I think it's very well designed. And I'm sympathetic to your desire to have a beautiful single-family home. And given that you've spent considerable time with the planning staff and Historic Preservation Committee, but I'm trying not to look at it just as the future of your family, but looking at it as a commissioner who spent significant time now with the General Plan Committee and with the North 40, and just the discussions that we as a town have been making about the diversity of product types in town, diversity of economic opportunities, and it's prime real estate, which is one of the reasons why you bought it. But I have significant reservations of converting 2 units, two smaller units. It's a total of 1256 to 1 unit that's going to be the largest on the block at 2708. And you know, we've heard from several young professionals, single professionals, who like the idea of walking to town. It's the new demographic that we're targeting and that we're hoping to move to Los Gatos. And I just feel like this is the exact product type that 2 young professionals would be looking for as they consider Los Gatos their home. And so for that reason, and again, I appreciate your own desires, but I will not be approving the application.
Okay, I have a comment as the other member of the General Plan and North 40 Committee. Commissioner Sayak said it better than I could, but we're struggling on North 40 to try to figure out how to create and preserve a variety of housing types that are affordable to different people and that are in different locations. The problem I have with this particular application and why I'm going to support the motion is that the town policies are working at cross purposes. So if we have a house where we say you must keep your secondary unit, but we don't require it to be rented, they buy the house, we don't have a unit anyway. So the question then is, well, if we're going to require preservation of internal units or secondary units or duplexes, but yet we don't require that they be used that way, we don't have a unit anyway. So my difficulty is Mr. Shikari bought the property. He says he's not going to use it. So if I oppose the motion, essentially what am I getting? I haven't really lost a unit. But I absolutely am completely sympathetic with Commissioner Bourgeois and Commissioner Sayak. We have been struggling with this. So the idea of voluntarily agreeing to lose a unit is problematic to me. However, since we don't have one anyway, so my concern would be what we ought to be looking at is if there are these units, and we, as a town, we require a homeowner or a property owner to keep those units, then we ought to require that they be used in a way that makes that the first requirement meaningful. So since it's not meaningful here, I'm going to support the motion. Other discussion or questions? I'm going to call the question. There's been a motion made. Oh, Commissioner Smith, are you anticipating the vote, or are you going to make a comment?
I'm just going to make a comment, and that is, I'm very familiar with this house, and I'm going to make a comment based on the larger philosophical question which we've introduced here. Whenever this house was converted to these 2 units, I don't think good attention was paid to how it was designed inside. This particular house is deteriorating at a very rapid rate, so I'm glad to see for that neighborhood that something new is going up. And in terms of any time that we convert now, I really think more attention needs to be paid to the design of the conversion. And that's part of the problem that has happened in this unit. I mean, truly, this is a very difficult floor plan. And so I'm just thinking in the future, people who want to convert, and we encourage the conversion, but then we also have to think of these situations. Now it's coming back to us 15 years later, and it's practically inhabitable the way it is. So I just want to make that philosophical comment that we need to be paying more attention to the design of these multi-dwelling units. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Other comments or questions? Commissioner Talsfor.
To just tag on to this discussion, because I think it's an important one, and we struggle with it a lot. But I believe in this case, this house was not meant to be, when it was originally built, a duplex. And I think what happened years and years ago, because I bought a house like this that had a second unit in it, and it was put in there by the people because they had the space and they just did it. Big controversy about that years ago. So that is the only reason, is because the intent of this neighborhood and that house, I believe, was for a single house. So that's why I guess I'll support my own motion.
That's nice. Okay. Commission, motion's been made by Commissioner Talsfor with modifications to the conditions to approve the application, seconded by Commissioner Smith. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. The motion carries 5-1. Commissioner Sayak opposing. And there are appeal rights, correct?
Yes, this decision is appealable to the town council. The appeal must be filed within 10 days, and there's a fee for filing an appeal.
Thank you, Mr. Shikari. Next item on our agenda, if there are any commission matters, now's the time. Seeing none, we're adjourned.